Chapter 119. For the ordinary people of Chongling, the most important thing in the new year was to visit family and friends, especially with the elders. They had to walk around, give New Year greetings, and say some auspicious words. For the nobility of Chongling, the arrival of the new year was a new page in the history books and had more meaning. The Yuanwu emperor had entered the 12th year of his reign, but all the nobility of Chongling knew that starting from the 6th year of his ascension, this strongest emperor in the history of the Qin dynasty rarely asked about politics and was in seclusion to cultivate and seek the Tao. Even though most people were not sure of the Yuanwu emperor's true cultivation, they were almost certain that Realm 8 was not a problem for him. So the path he pursued was Realm 9 longevity. In these years, almost all the internal and external affairs of the Qin dynasty were given to the two ministers and the empress. But this did not mean that he only cared about cultivation and did not care. For example, when the bureau chief of the astrology bureau, Yi Xiling, returned in the storm and killed Zhao Zhan with one blow, all the nobility of Chongling felt that he had an invisible hand controlling the Qin dynasty. At the same time, he reminded all the nobility how he had ascended the throne. Starting from the 6th year of his ascension, the strongest emperor in the history of the Qin dynasty rarely saw his officials. Usually, only the two ministers and the empress could see him. But at the beginning of each new year, he would first invite the officials to a banquet, and then on the second day, he would ascend the heaven prayer platform to pray for blessings and do some clan matters. All the nobility knew that the Holy One would appear in the next 2 days. He needed to let all the nobility, including the people of the enemy dynasties, see that he was still healthy and strong, or even stronger. So, even though the first day of the banquet did not need to follow the etiquette of the ancestors, the atmosphere was still heavy and oppressive. In Preservation Peace Hall, the blue-gray tiles gave off the light of a lake covered in seaweed. All the nobility sat in front of their tables. Yi Xiling was sitting behind the front row of tables. Among all the bureau chiefs, she was the only woman, so she appeared very out of place. Not far from her, a fat man with a body like an iron tower squinted his eyes and exuded an incomparably domineering aura. It was Marquis Su of Mount Hung, who had attacked her in the past. The seats for the two prime ministers were placed on the two sides closest to the throne. The two prime ministers hadn't arrived yet, but the empress, the future master of the Qin dynasty, and several princes had already arrived. The empress was wearing the most beautiful phoenix coronet dress of the Qin dynasty, which made her look even more dignified and dazzling. Yi Xiling's eyelashes fluttered. His gaze did not linger on her but landed on Prince Fu Su behind her. Her gaze turned cold. To be able to cause her gaze to tremble slightly, there was naturally a great abnormality. Many of the nobles saw that Fu Su was different from before. Feeling the presence he gave off, many of the nobles who could speak in front of the empress couldn't help but congratulate. Your Highness Fu Su is truly extraordinary. To reach Realm 5 at such an age, this is worthy of celebration. Many of the officials who had not detected it were shocked. While he was an imperial son and the son of the empress, he naturally had the strongest support on the path of cultivation. The first few realms he had spent the least amount of time on, but with Fu Su's age, entering Realm 4 was normal. But entering Realm 5 was not something that could be done with the resources of a country. It had to do with his own talent and the teaching he received. In Baoshi, Jing Liuli and the others might have better talent and teachings than Fu Su, but they did not have such strong support. So many of the officials thought that in the future emperor of the Qin dynasty would likely still be the strongest cultivator of the Qin dynasty. The empress smiled slightly. She was naturally satisfied. But at this time, a palace attendant behind Fu Su said, His Highness Fu Su was able to understand sword manuals and cultivation records at the age of 3. In the history of the Qin dynasty, only one person is like His Highness Fu Su. In the future, His Highness Fu Su will naturally be the top cultivator of Chongling. Many palace maids were very close to the empress and princes. Even if they spoke in this kind of setting, no one would feel it was too rude, especially since the emperor and the two prime ministers had not yet arrived. Especially since the nobles had spoken in front of them, the atmosphere was slightly relaxed. However, some of her words were like thunder, like the coldest sword. They instantly stunned everyone, stunned many people, and also frightened many people. Even Yi's ceiling paled slightly. Even Marquis Su of Mount Hung sweated slightly. Many people even stopped breathing at this moment, and cold sweat seeped out of their foreheads. The air in the hall seemed to freeze in this moment, sinking into absolute silence. Everyone's gazes gathered in disbelief on that palace attendant. Just how much courage and insanity did one have to be to dare to say such disgraceful words? At this time, an authoritative chant came from the path of the imperial palace outside the hall. This meant that the two ministers and the Holy One were not far from the hall. With the Holy One's cultivation, it was impossible for him not to hear loud words at such a distance. Many people's faces instantly turned pale. They looked at the beautiful palace attendant and began to understand that these words, which contained deep meaning, were definitely not an unintentional mistake. While this palace attendant's words were true, in the history of the Qin dynasty, only one person like Fu Su was able to comprehend sword manuals at the age of 3. All the history books about that person had been burned before the Yuanwu emperor ascended the throne. Even more importantly, many of the nobles knew the noblest mistress of the Qin dynasty, the empress, had some unclean stories with that person. That person comprehended sword manuals at the age of 3. Fu Su also comprehended sword manuals at the age of 3. What kind of thoughts would this cause? While the words were praising Fu Su on the surface, in the ears of the nobles, they were more malicious than any other words and caused them to feel cold. A young person with a humble expression trembled slightly. He was sitting not far from Yi's ceiling in a high position. He was the bureau chief of the clan law bureau, Huang Jinwei. At this time, he looked at that dignified and beautiful palace attendant with an unbearable expression. He wanted to speak, but even he did not dare to speak. Fu Su, who had been smiling brightly a few moments ago, clearly felt the sudden change in the atmosphere.
But he did not understand why.
Because before he could understand sword manuals, those history books had been burned and rewritten. Before he was born, no one dared to say that person's name. He looked in shock at the beautiful palace attendant behind him and then turned to look pleadingly at his mother empress. The empress' features were still flawless and dazzlingly beautiful, but her gaze gradually turned cold. Even Fu Su seemed to see a terrifying cold sword being pulled out of a bottomless pool of ice. His eyes felt a stabbing pain, and unprecedented cold terror rose in his heart. Some of the officials near the back were terrified, their heads bowed as they trembled. She slowly turned around and looked coldly at the beautiful palace attendant, who seemed to be confused. She said, "No matter who is standing behind you, do you think you can change anything by doing this?" Preserving Peace Hall was deathly silent. She looked at the palace attendant, shook her head, and said, "Nothing can be changed." The beautiful palace attendant said respectfully and apologetically, "Apologies." Then, in a very low voice, she said, "Just say these words." Before the empress could speak again, the beautiful palace attendant smiled bleakly and said, "This sinful servant deserves to die."
Poof.
She did not make any extra movements, but a mouthful of blood surged out of her mouth. Fu Su gaped at this scene. He felt that this palace attendant's vitality had been completely cut off when she said those words. Especially when he was right in front of this palace attendant, and the blood the palace attendant had spat out before she died was about to land on his clothes. But at this time, an inexplicable power appeared in the hall. A wave of primal energies of the universe suddenly flooded in from the entrance of the hall and wrapped around the palace attendant's body. Time seemed to stop. The blood and the palace attendant's body were absolutely still. Then, in the next moment, the blood and the palace attendant's body, all of her clothes, flesh, and blood were turned to dust by this power in a breath. Because the dust was too small, and because this change was too unreal, no one felt the slightest bit of blood at this moment. Only when all of the dust disappeared, blown into the air by the scattered primal energies of the universe, and scattered to unknown places in the world, did the people in the hall start to be taken over by all kinds of emotions. Yi Sealing bowed her head and did not look elsewhere. She only looked at the table in front of her. A figure dressed in dragon robes appeared at the entrance of the hall. Behind him were two majestic figures with mountainous presences. The two ministers of the Qin dynasty. But compared to him, they seemed very short, like the steps under his feet. This emperor, the most powerful in the history of the Qin dynasty and the most loved by his subjects, had a confident and powerful expression on his face. He was not as lost in thought as he had been when he had faced the empress alone that night. Rise. Facing all of the bowing nobles, he smiled slightly, as though the terrifying power he had just displayed had nothing to do with him, as though nothing had happened. That palace maid, like all the things he had erased, seemed to have never appeared in this hall. The coldness in the empress' eyes had completely disappeared. A motherly smile appeared on her perfect face. Just like in previous years, the emperor sat down and, without much ceremony, raised a cup of wine and started the banquet. A banquet where the emperor and his subjects met and the Qin dynasty advanced steadily. Chapter 120. Ding Ning and Shun Yi walked side by side. In front of them there were many huts stacked together. This was Fish Market. Actually, we can't see much in Fish Market now. Ding Ning turned to look at Qin Yi and said without hiding anything, even if it's an underground business, there are very few that open during the new year.
Shun Yi said, no matter.
Quiet has quiet scenery, and lively has lively scenery. Ding Ning turned strangely to look at this Guanzhong youth and said, this does not seem to be something someone of your personality would say. Qin Yi smiled and said, senior brother is really perceptive. Indeed, I didn't say those words, but rather my little uncle's famous words. There are few more. If you really want to see the scenery of a place, not only when it's quiet, but also when it's lively, but also when it's in 4 seasons. If you really want to see a friend, not only when they're proud, but also when they're frustrated, down, and in danger. To be able to say famous words, the speaker had to be very famous. So Ding Ning, who had already walked into Fish Market, asked, who is your uncle? Shun Yi said, my uncle is Shen Huai. Ding Ning stilled. One of the Guanzhong 5 swords? Shun Yi nodded. Ding Ning glanced at him. I had not expected him to be your uncle. Then why did you not learn the sword from him? Guanzhong had 800 miles of flat land and many sword masters. To be recognized as one of the 5 most powerful swords, Shen Huai's fame was great. Shen Yi said in a low and ashamed voice, he taught me my sword personally. Ding Ning stilled and said, apologies. Shen Yi shook his head and said, the same sword manual creates different cultivators. My uncle once told me that the crux of cultivation is the path one chooses. Ding Ning nodded and said, he is right. One's vision sometimes determines one's height. I should have come to Chongling earlier. Otherwise, I would not have thought of such a unique place in the world. Shun Yi had already followed Ding Ning into Fish Market. He looked at the streets and alleys that seemed to be immersed in a ghost realm. He looked at the lanterns that seemed to glow like willow, the wisps in the darkness, and asked curiously in a soft voice, everything is traded here, including forbidden items. Can even I buy them? Ding Ning looked at him and said, you can buy it, but you have to go through some middlemen here. Shun Yi, who knew that there must be a lot of connections, became even more curious and asked, then can I participate in some underground auctions? Of course, Ding Ning said, but you must obtain the trust of those middlemen. With your status as the son of a wealthy family in Guanzhong, there should be no problem if you want to participate. However, when they really wanted to buy something, they still needed a middleman to bid. Otherwise, if many people know who the item ends up in, it will bring disaster instead. Shun Yi said from the bottom of his heart, if there is a chance, I will take a look. Maybe there will be something useful. The lamb shop in the west sold lamb on the outside, but inside, there were human traffickers. They sold children from remote places, and even other dynasties. The tailor shop in the east specialized in the seal weapon business of the Chu dynasty. The 3 stilted buildings near the pond at the bottom were the accounts of the overseas bandits. If one wanted to participate in the underground auctions of all kinds of cultivator items, one had to find pockmarked Shui who sold tung oil, or Old Joe, who sold salted fish. Ding Ning led Shun Yi to the deepest part of Fish Market, the bottom of Fish Market. At the same time, he slowly explained the many connections in Fish Market to him. Shun Yi was listening more and more intently, but he didn't notice that Ding Ning's speech was getting slower and slower. Next, no matter what you hear me say, do not have any obvious changes in your expression. Just pretend that you are listening to me chatting with you. Do not let anyone discover anything unusual. Suddenly, Ding Ning's words reached his ears. Because he spoke slowly, Chen Yi had enough time to react. His heart suddenly shook, but he quickly controlled his emotions and asked softly, "What's wrong?" Today, Ding Ning had come to Fish Market to pay a New Year greeting to that lonely old woman and chat with her. But just now, he sensed an unusual and dangerous presence. There should be someone who wants to assassinate me. Those who dare to make a move in Fish Market are true fugitives. That's why you've been dragged into this matter. Ding Ning said calmly and slowly, "While I do not know who it is, my life and yours are in your hands. So you have to listen carefully and remember every word I say. You cannot make any mistakes." Looking at the unusually calm streets and alleys, Shen Yi, who could not sense any killing intent, grew more shocked. But the seriousness in Ding Ning's calm words caused him to be certain this was not a joke. "Speak, I will do it," he nodded and said softly. Ding Ning lowered his voice and bowed his head slightly. Even his lips were hidden in the shadows. "In a moment, I will take you past many shops. The owners of those shops are not ordinary people and are related to the underground master of Fish Market. However, I don't know which store is open right now. Later, you will enter whichever store is open. After you enter, you'll begin to calculate the time. After 50 breaths, you will use your fastest speed to inform the owner of the store that someone is about to kill someone in Fish Market. The location is at the Ghost Worry Pier." Shun Yi did not understand why Ding Ning wanted him to calculate the time, but he still remembered every word. At the same time, he repeated in a soft and simple voice, "Enter the shop. Time. 50 breaths. Ask for help. Ghost Worry Pier." Ding Ning nodded calmly and said, "Just remember. What I will say to you next will be ordinary chatter." Shun Yi glanced at him and said, "I understand." Ding Ning continued to lead the way towards the stilted building where the old woman was. He continued to talk about the ways of Fish Market, but inside, he was filled with indescribable anger and coldness. Just as he and Zhongsun Qianxua had said, he originally did not want to involve the young miss of the Shang family because of some old matters. He did not want to borrow her power. But today, he was just visiting the elderly. On a new year like this, someone forced him to borrow the power of Fish Market.
Who was it?
His heart grew colder and angrier, but his thoughts grew more active. He considered more and more things to follow. The ponds at the lowest part of Fish Market were mostly covered by the roofs of the huts, so not much snow had fallen. At this time, there was only a layer of ice 2 knuckles thick on the surface of the water. 2 threads of fire suddenly appeared in Ding Ning's calm eyes. His gaze once again landed on the last flower remnant sword at his waist. At this time, they were near the numerous shops that he and Shun Yi had mentioned. Of the numerous shops, only one was open. There was fire and the presence of people inside. Ding Ning knew that the owner of the shop was in the weapon business. There were many good swords in his stilted house. Li Daoji's last flower remnant sword had been bought from there. Originally, people who were completely unrelated to him were somehow related to this broken sword. Therefore, it was as if there were countless grudges involved in fate. This broken sword seemed to be the key to unlocking fate. It had been sealed here and had been waiting for him for many years. That shop sells swords. You do not need a middleman to go in alone. The shop owner has many good swords that are inferior to many cultivation places in Chongling. You can go take a look and wait for me here. I'll meet you here after paying New Year's greetings." Ding Ning pointed at the shop, raised his head, and looked calmly at Shen Yi. Shen Yi naturally knew that Ding Ning's words were just idle chatter. He could not wait for Ding Ning to come back and meet him here. So he nodded slightly and said, "All right, since this is the only shop open, I will walk around this one." Ding Ning smiled slightly and left Shunyi here to continue forward. Shunyi looked at him with more respect. He was not as good as Ding Ning to be able to show such a smile at such a dangerous time. Ding Ning's brow imperceptibly furrowed. The ghost worry pier in front of him was under several stilted buildings filled with firewood. There were no shops nearby, and his vision was blocked. It was the best place to assassinate on this route. If he was in a different position, he would have chosen that place to assassinate someone. At this moment, he sensed that the scents were all moving towards that place. This meant that these people had come to deal with him, and not to plot against Shunyi. He took a deep breath, and the countless little silkworms in his body seemed to have awakened with his breath, and silently surged within his body. Shunyi tried to be as calm as possible, but when he pushed open the door and entered the shop, his breathing uncontrollably sped up. The man on the couch inside seemed to sense Shunyi's abnormality and gave a soft snort. Shunyi thought of Ding Ning's warning that he could not cause problems early. So he immediately took a deep breath and started to calculate the time in his mind. At the same time, he said, "I come from the Guanzhong Shin family. I have heard that you have many good swords here." The man with the disheveled hair looked coldly at him in the darkness, but did not speak and moved back. As the blanket over him was lifted and the black sword box was revealed, Shunyi saw that he did not have feet. His legs were cut off at the knees. Seeing such a scene, Shunyi could no longer control his emotions and involuntarily let out a low cry. "Your legs are inconvenient. What should we do?" Not having feet had nothing to do with selling swords. Shunyi's exclamation was abrupt, but the disheveled hair man's gaze flashed. He lowered his voice and said calmly, "Something happened?" Chapter 121. Ding Ning continued to walk silently. He had reached the ghost worry pier he had spoken of before. This place was below several stilted buildings that were used to store firewood. These stilted buildings were slightly higher than the other stilted buildings. Because they were warehouses, the things piled up inside were relatively heavy. Therefore, there were more wooden pillars used to support them than ordinary stilted buildings. Some of the wooden pillars were erected very casually, while others were slanted. In addition, the wooden plank path below was used as a dock. On both sides of the path, there were many buckets and small black awning boats. The mooring ropes were tied to these wooden pillars, and the swaying ropes made people think of hanged ghosts. His footsteps appeared casual, but in reality, he accurately controlled the time. This was Fish Market. There were many true experts hidden here who did not allow outsiders to mess around. So, if someone wanted to kill him here, he had a natural advantage. The reason he had set a time with Shunyi was because he wanted to give the enemy a chance to act, but he also had to ensure that the people who could control the situation could arrive in time. The enemies who wanted to kill him naturally had to be dealt with once and for all. Otherwise, there would be many unspeakable dangers in the future. Moreover, he thought further than the average person. This time, even if he couldn't find out who was behind the assassins, there was a possibility that he could use them to achieve his other goal. The water surface had frozen. Because the water here was usually turbid black water, the ice surface was black, and set off the name of this ghost worry pier. The not-so-sturdy wooden planks were firmly frozen on the ice surface, so walking on them was steadier than usual. The surrounding black awning boats and buckets were so frozen that they could not move. Even the ropes had icicles of various lengths. Everything was so silent, and there was no one in sight. Yet Ding Ning knew that the cultivator closest to him was in a black awning boat dozens of feet to the left. This cultivator gave off a weak presence, and his breathing was very stable. He would only breathe once in a long time. Even when Ding Ning was so close, this cultivator's breathing rate did not change at all. In reality, other than this cultivator, there were two other cultivators who were further away. He could not sense any presence of cultivators coming from them. He only smelled their scent. This was the uniqueness of the Three Corpses Non-Self Soul Sutra. While it was not as good as the Nine-Death Silkworm in sensing vital energy, and the primal energies of the universe, the Three Corpses Non-Self Origin Sutra could not be compared to other methods in sensing minute sounds and smells. From the two cultivators who were following him in secret, As well as the cultivators who were close to him right now, he smelled a slightly fishy but also sweet and greasy scent. Ding Ning was familiar with the scent of the coiled snake flower's juice. The juice of the coiled snake flower was a natural poison. Cultivators below Realm 5 could not force the poison out with their cultivation. For cultivators below Realm 3, it could be said to be fatal. But to put poison on weapons was a shameful thing for Chongling. Even in the entire Qin dynasty, only the bandits around Jiaodong Commandery would put such poison on their weapons. People who carried weapons like this could only be here to kill, and not to discuss matters with him. Hearing the occasional soft breathing, Ding Ning's steps did not stop, and his expression did not change. He did not even look at the ship embedded in the ice. Suddenly, his right hand gripped the hilt of the last flower remnant sword, and drew out several sword paths in the air with astounding speed. A simple white sword seal formed, and then disappeared. Amidst the white frost, multiple icicles shot towards the black canopy. In this silent space, there were ear-piercing, tearing sounds. The cultivator in the canopy prepared to attack in the next moment. He had not thought that his tracks would be exposed, and that Ding Ning would be so unreasonable as to attack without asking for a reason. In great shock, the black-robed cultivator hiding in the black canopy poured out his vital energy without reservation as the icicles stabbed into the black canopy. In this narrow space, he did not have time to use any sword moves. He reached out and slapped the canopy behind him. Before an even louder tearing sound, he flew out in a strange posture, like a wounded black bird. This was a cultivator with a short beard. His lips were thick, and his gaze was as sharp as a hawk's. He did not cover his face. His reaction could not be said to be slow. However, what made his face instantly filled with shock was that just as his body separated from the broken roof, in the instant that he did not even have time to think about how to counterattack, a sword light that looked like a cluster of countless white flowers had already ruthlessly stabbed into his waist. The wine shop youth that he thought he could kill in a flash and did not need to disguise his face seemed to have calculated his reaction and flashed to the back of the black canopy without stopping. The other's thin body was stretched to its limit, and in a posture that looked like it was pressed against the black canopy, the sword accurately stabbed into his waist and into his organs. This black-robed cultivator heard his body give off a sound like an inflated sheepskin raft bursting. The great pain caused his body to reflexively jump back like a shrimp. He sensed the power in his body was rapidly flowing away, but he still raised the black short sword in his right hand that gave off a sweet smell. He wanted to give Ding Ning a fatal blow before he died. However, right at this moment, he felt a sharp pain on his neck. A downward impact caused him to fall backwards before he could even complete a forward thrust. A muffled bang. He felt like a piece of meat in the hands of a butcher that had been slapped onto a chopping board. When his back collided with the cold black ice, he finally heard the sizzling sounds coming from his neck, followed by countless, even smaller sizzling sounds coming from the surrounding ice. He finally reacted. Just now, Ding Ning's movements had not stopped at all. As he arched in pain, the other's sword had been pulled out of his waist and then quickly stabbed into his neck. The sound at this time was the sound of boiling hot blood spurting out from his neck, as well as the sound of countless blood droplets landing on the ice-cold surface, burning fine holes in the ice surface. How was this possible? This was a common youth who had never fought before. How could his killing methods be crueler and more skilled than his own? He first felt inexplicable shock and disbelief. Then he felt terror. But when he opened his mouth, he could not make a sound. The last thing he felt was warm blood gushing up from his throat, instantly filling up the space in his mouth and gushing out from his lips. This black-robed cultivator was like a black fish that had just been slaughtered, lying twisted on the ice. Scarlet hot blood spread out on the ice and quickly seeped down. Ding Ning, who had killed this black-robed cultivator with 2 blows, had an unusually calm expression. He steadied himself on the blood-soaked ice, straightened, and turned to look. A green-robed cultivator and a cultivator dressed in dark red embroidered robes had appeared on the nearby ice. These 2 cultivators were also not masked. The green-robed cultivator had short hair and looked to be in his 40s. His eyebrows were sparse, and his eyes were a special brown color. The dark red brocade-robed cultivator had a round face, short and round figure. He was not much different from the fat merchants of Chongling. However, his narrowed eyes gave off a cold gaze like a poisonous snake choosing its prey. "While I do not know who sent you to kill me, you are too arrogant to kill here." Sensing the powerful presences of these two people, Ding Ning was not nervous at all. He said in a sympathetic tone and slight disdain, "This is Fish Market. You think this is a place any cat or dog can come and easily leave?" Hearing Ding Ning's voice, the green-robed, short-haired cultivator was expressionless. The fat merchant shook his head and copied his words. "While I do not know how you discovered us, you dared to lure us to attack. Even if this is Fish Market, we still have time to kill you and leave." As he spoke, a dim and thin sword quickly fell down along a wooden pillar behind Ding Ning, and then flew towards the back of Ding Ning's neck. This was a Realm 5 sneak attack without warning from a flying sword. But Ding Ning had clearly smelled the scent of this flying sword, but he remained motionless. He didn't even intend to use his sword to attack this flying sword. Not right. The two cultivators sensed something strange at the same time, and their pupils contracted. The fat merchant cultivator sensed the coldness from under the ice under his feet. He felt great terror. His vital energy surged out of his feet, and his hands grabbed wildly, as though he wanted to grab something. But he and the green-robed cultivator next to him had sensed too late, and could not change anything. With a cracking sound, a crack appeared on the black ice under his feet. Ice powder and water vapor spurted out like a fountain. A small crimson sword pierced through his right foot, followed by a stream of blood and fragments, like a strange snake, flying out from the back of his head. This fat merchant cultivator's eyes widened. He fell back heavily. Even now, he had not discovered who had attacked with this sword. His thin flying sword lost control and floated away. It slid by several feet from Ding Ning and cut into a wooden pillar. It shook slightly and then became motionless like a dead dragonfly. Chapter 122. With a strange hum, a light blue flying sword that looked like a bamboo leaf flew out of the green-robed cultivator's sleeve. It danced around him, spreading out countless sword shadows like bamboo leaves falling down. His face was slightly pale as he stared at the small crimson sword that flickered in and out of sight in the darkness. This person was able to make this small crimson sword sneak under the ice without him and his companions detecting it. This meant that the other's cultivation was above his. Just now, if he had been the one to attack first, he would have been facing death. Rapid footsteps reached his and Ding Ning's ears. Even paler, Shen Yi, so nervous his forehead was covered in sweat, appeared in front of the green-robed cultivator and Ding Ning with the legless man on his back. Seeing Ding Ning still standing and the two corpses lying on the ice, Chen Yi immediately felt relieved. At the same time, he turned his head again and looked at the man with the disheveled hair on his back with a complicated expression. He finally understood that his fixed thinking was wrong. Not having legs did not mean he was not fast. At this time, the green-robed cultivator took a deep breath and gave a hurried shout. The ice under his feet shattered, and he flew to the side. Clang, 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 clang. The extremely terrifying sounds of metal clashing sounded around him. Countless sword images seemed unreal, exploding with small but dazzling sparks around him. Shun Yi's breathing completely stopped. He could sense the vital energy of the sword shop owner on his back was rapidly flowing and releasing. The aura of the small crimson sword that had been faintly discernible in the darkness had completely changed. It had gone from being stealthy at the beginning to being a pure slash of speed. The crimson sword wrapped around the green-robed cultivator, who wanted to flee, forming an impenetrable sword net. The green-robed cultivator's flying sword was pushed dozens of feet away from him, and his body was forced to stop completely. "You can't run anymore." The sword shop owner's lips curled up slightly. He said coldly, "Even if you can win against me, you cannot escape today. Also, you cannot even win against me." As he spoke, the small crimson sword suddenly retreated and floated in the shadows. In this short moment of fighting, the green-robed cultivator's clothing was completely soaked in sweat. "I may not run." However, he looked at the sword shop owner and said these words. Just as he said this, the ice beneath his feet suddenly cracked. His entire body was like a sword, directly stabbing into the ice below, sinking into the bone-chilling muddy water. The small light green sword that had been flying around him followed closely behind, sinking into the water with a hiss. Senior sect brother Ding Ning. "Careful!" Chun-Yi suddenly reacted and let out a cry of horror. The muddy and sticky water concealed many of that person's presences. The flying sword stirred up the water under the ice. The green-robed cultivator clearly did not want to leave. He seemed to have turned into an enormous poisonous python, moving through the water to kill Ding Ning on the ice. But at this moment, Ding Ning was still extremely calm. He said in an unusually sincere tone, "I want him alive. This is good for fish market." Shin-Yi was stunned. Strange turbulence suddenly appeared on the black and murky ice surface. Cold flows of energy flooded out of the ice, but the ice was not damaged at all. In the next moment, he saw many black bamboos grow out of the ice, swaying without wind. A huge and terrifying cold aura turned the area into a real ghost town. All sounds disappeared, and the color under the water became even gloomier. It was as if an invisible hand had grabbed the huge poisonous python in an instant. The time was actually very short, but it felt very long. The small crimson sword that flickered in and out of the shadows flew back into the sleeve of the sword shop owner. A patch of ice not far in front of Ding Ning strangely arched upwards like a bamboo shoot was growing out of the mud below. Clack, clack, clack. Finally, there was sound in this deathly silent area. Pieces of ice flew up and fell down. A muddy and dark flow of water surged out like a monster and overturned on the ice at the side. The muddy water spread out on the ice like black oil. The figure that appeared was the green-robed cultivator. At this time, his body was dyed black by the muddy water. He was motionless, and it was unknown if he was alive. The swaying black bamboos on the ice seemed to have never existed and silently dissipated. There was a hiss. Only now did Shun-Yi recover his ability to breathe. He started to breathe heavily. Only now did he understand what kind of place fish market was in Chongling. A hunchbacked old man with a black bamboo staff slowly walked out on a wooden path. Shun-Yi's heart beat faster as though it was going to jump out of his throat. This was clearly a Realm 7 Grandmaster cultivator. More importantly, this cultivator cultivated the Yin and Ghost path rarely seen in the Qin dynasty. While there was no difference in cultivation methods between the righteous path and the unorthodox path, the cultivation records were clear. Cultivators who cultivated the Yin and Ghost path had a harder time reaching Realm 7 than cultivators who cultivated ordinary methods. "What do you want to do?" The old man with the black bamboo staff withdrew his terrifying presence and asked Ding Ning calmly. Ding Ning bowed in thanks to him and the sword shop owner. He said, "The Divinity Bureau should be very interested in him. I know an official called Mo Qinggong." The old man with the black bamboo staff shook his head slightly. "You're close to Wang Taishu. You should understand that matters in the dark have to be dealt with in the dark. If you get involved with the court, you will attract many disasters." "I understand this." Ding Ning looked at him and said seriously, "But even more importantly, those who want to deal with me should be people in the court and of high status. I will come to fish market in the future, and they did not care about the rules of fish market this time, so if the person behind them cannot be restrained, there will be even less rules in the marketplace." After a pause, he looked at the old man with the black bamboo staff and added sincerely, "Also, even if something happens, the top of 2-level tower will be in front." The old man with the black bamboo staff thought for a moment and said, "I will have someone send him out of fish market to Wang Taishu to deal with." Ding Ning had been extremely calm before, but when he heard the old man agree and thought of the following possibilities, his heart uncontrollably beat violently. He bowed deeply and thanked the old man with the black bamboo staff again. "You purposefully gave them a chance to act and used the power of fish market. Next time, it is best if something like this does not happen. The old man with the black bamboo staff did not return the bow. He glanced at him and said coldly, "No one likes to be used." Ding Ning did not argue and said respectfully, "There will not be a next time. You know that I am a cultivator who can deal with them." After the hunchbacked old man with the black bamboo staff turned and left, the sword shop owner looked coldly at Ding Ning and asked, "I am not sure, but at least I am sure you are related to the person in charge here." Ding Ning looked at him and said, "Also, I gave Shinny enough time. Even if you feel you cannot deal with them, there is time for someone else to come here." The sword shop owner's gaze swept across the body of the cultivator who had been stabbed to death by Ding Ning and said, "Even people who have been on the path for many years may not be as decisive and thoughtful as you. No wonder Wang Taishu values you so much." Ding Ning said, "Mr.'s flying sword is also very powerful." The sword shop owner did not respond but said to Shani, "You carried me here. Are you tired?" Shani stilled and said, "Not tired." The sword shop owner said, "If you are not tired, then please carry me back." Shani stilled and then said with a slight sweat, "Of course." Ding Ning smiled and said, "I will go back with you first." Shani looked hesitantly at the two cultivator corpses on the ice and the cultivator, who seemed to be dead. He said softly, "Then we do not need to care?" Ding Ning glanced at him and said, "Since the people of Fish Market have said so, are you still not reassured?" Shen Yi sighed in relief. But thinking back to everything that had happened just now, when he started to walk, he could not help but say softly in admiration, "Senior sect brother Ding Ning, I am not as good as you." Ding Ning understood this Guangzhou youth's straightforward personality very well. He knew that no matter how humble he was, the other would still maintain his opinion. So he did not respond. Shin Yi could not help but turn and ask the sword shop owner, "Mister, your cultivation is so high. Who could cut off your legs?" Ding Ning immediately had an awkward expression. This was akin to rubbing at a scar. While he knew that Shen Yi was grateful for the other's help and asked with intentions of helping the other. But did the other understand Shen Yi's personality? The sword shop owner said in a cold voice, "I was envied by junior sect brother and plotted against." Ding Ning stilled. Shen Yi's expression immediately became awkward. He said, "While I admire senior sect brother Ding Ning, I do not hate him." The sword shop owner sneered and did not speak. Shen Yi's chivalrous heart rose again. He asked, "How can there be such a vicious junior sect brother? Have you gotten revenge?" Hearing such tender words, the sword shop owner frowned and said, "If I had gotten revenge, I would not have needed to flee to Chongling." Shen Yi immediately grew angry and said, "What is that person's name? Where is he now?" The sword shop owner seemed to find this Guangzhou youth interesting and said with slight disdain, "That person is called Gongzi Bai. He is in Camp Mound." Camp Mound? Shen Yi stilled. "Mister, you are a cultivator of the Qi dynasty?" Hearing this, Ding Ning's eyes flashed with an unusual light. He could not help but glance at the sword shop owner. "Ji Country Marquis Gongzi Bai." Shen Yi stilled. Just now, he clearly did not know who Gongzi Bai was. The sword shop owner smiled with slight disdain and nodded. "My junior sect brother has been ennobled. If you want revenge, the Qin dynasty must destroy the Qi dynasty." Chapter 123. Mo Qinggong looked with a dark expression at the many files piled up in front of him. Because he had been reading for a long time, his eyes were slightly blurred. So he took out a small glass medicine bottle and dripped several drops into his eyes to clear the mind. Even though it was the new year, they were not idle. That serving girl called Li Wanzhu had been in the palace for more than a decade. Usually, everything was normal. Up until now, they had not found any clues. However, the exceptionally bitter words she had said at the banquet could be ignored by the Holy One and the Empress, but the Divinity Bureau could not ignore them. She has been dead for so many years and disappeared for so many years. She still hasn't given up. Why is there an air coming out? Mo Qinggong rubbed his eyes and said to himself. His soft but dark words echoed in the gray room. While the Divinity Bureau always had things to do and Chongling had never been peaceful, since last year, the undercurrents in Chongling had surged like never before. Yi Sealing returned from overseas. Zhao Zhan died, the great rebels of the Zhao Sword Furnace and Cloud Water Palace moved around Chongling like never before. Bureau Chief Su went out to sea. Song Qingshu and Nangong Shang's deaths, the reappearance of the Nine Hell King Sword, the palace attendants' insinuations, all of this seemed unrelated. But Mo Qinggong knew that all of this started from the reappearance of the Nine-Death Silkworm. That person had been dead for so many years, just a faint air, but many people's hearts started to move. In his view, for the powerful Qin dynasty at this time, these people's movements would only cause some meaningless destruction. At this time, his assistant, the young official who had taken over Qin Huaishi's position, knocked on the door and quickly walked in. Official Mo, Wang Taishu has sent a cultivator over. Compared to before, this young official was much more mature. After a quick bow, he said without wasting words, "It is a cultivator who tried to assassinate Ding Ning in Fish Market, Realm 5 cultivation. There are 2 other cultivators present, one Realm 4, one Realm 5. Those 2 have been killed, but their corpses can be examined."
What?
Mo Qinggong suddenly stood up. "Send that person to the Great Floating Water Prison."
No.
Inform the bureau chief. But he immediately changed his words. "I will personally escort that person to the Great Floating Water Prison." "You did well." Then, he said to the young Divinity Bureau official, 2 Realm 5s and 1 Realm 4 assassinated Ding Ning in Fish Market. 2 were dead, and 1 was injured, leaving only 1 Realm 5 alive. The young Divinity Bureau official had indeed told him everything he needed to know at the first possible moment. In the battle between Shui Wangshu and Liang Lian, even a teacher of the Holy Son of Heaven used the Soaring Cloud Sword to protect Shui Wangshu. At the very least, all the truly influential people in the know would know that this was the Empress' intention. Only true desperados, and only desperados from outside, would know the power of Fish Market, but in their hearts, they would ignore the power of Fish Market and dare to make a move in Fish Market. Someone who could invite 3 desperados like this to assassinate Ding Ning at the same time was a true noble. This survivor would be an extremely important breakthrough point. Compared to normal people, cultivators had many unique methods. They could make themselves die quickly, and they could make themselves feel no pain. But the Great Floating Water Prison had many methods to make cultivators speak, and they could ensure that this survivor would not be killed. Even more importantly, they had to ensure that this survivor could be safely sent to the Great Floating Water Prison. Hearing Mo Qinggong's praise, this young Divinity Bureau official was overjoyed, but he maintained his calm. At the same time, he quickly said, "Wang Taishu said that 2-level tower will cooperate with official Mo to send this person to the water prison." Hearing this, Mo Qinggong's mood eased slightly. For Chongling, today was fated to be extraordinary. It could not be denied that the footprints of some people were enough to affect the history books of the future. There were many abandoned gardens in the west of Chongling. That place had once been the home of many prestigious families, but after some bloody killings in the first year of Yuanwu, people rarely came here. Most of them had been redistributed as rewards. But perhaps because too many people had died and the fiendish energy was too strong, most of the places were still abandoned. There was a small temple in this abandoned garden that worshipped the city god. Usually there was not much incense, but they felt that a temple like this would be more stable. So, some noble people had given some silver to maintain this small temple. The small temple was just a few rows in front and back. It was just like a farm with a bamboo fence. It had been overgrown with weeds, and now that it was the middle of winter, it appeared even more desolate and barren. The tall and burly Fanjua, who was brimming with the rebellious aura that only great rebels would have, was standing in front of this small temple. Beside him stood a young man in a white fox fur coat. He had sharp eyebrows and bright eyes. His appearance was handsome, and his skin was as white as cream. He looked like a delicate young master from a wealthy family. However, his body exuded an aura of arrogance that even Fanjua could not compare to. This kind of pride was not like the false arrogance of many disciples from prestigious families. It was the kind of presence that naturally formed after 10 years of sword refinement in the cold pool, killing a serpent in one day, and destroying the country and the mountains and rivers. He was naturally Bai Shanshui. After fighting his way out of Chongling with his song and sword, his fame seemed to surpass Zhao Yi of the Zhao sword furnace. The door to the temple was half closed, and the threshold was not high. But Bai Shanshui's eyes were filled with true emotion. He reached out and pushed open the temple door. In a corner of the central hall, there was an old temple attendant who was cooking something on a simple stove made of stone. The moment he saw this old temple attendant, Bai Shanshui sighed softly. Everyone in the world is guessing why I have to come to Chongling and stay in Chongling. But they do not know that it is for you, Mr. Zhuang. After many twists and turns, many dangers, and countless time, I had not expected Mr. Zhuang to be hiding in this small temple. The old temple attendant turned around. His long face was covered in knife-like wrinkles, but his brows were as black as ink. As his gaze moved, his body seemed to release an inexplicable presence. His dim yellow eyes grew deep, as though he could see all the streets of Chongling at a glance. Every wrinkle on his face seemed to release the wind and frost of the past. It really was not easy. This old temple attendant did not speak hypocritically. He said from the bottom of his heart, "You are truly priceless. If you die, the last of the Wei's spirit will dissipate. You took such a great risk to find me. You really obtained the secrets of the Lonely Mountain Sword Horde, and the secrets of the Lonely Mountain Sword Horde are related to me?" Bai Shanshui smiled slightly and said emotionally, "It is not just related to Mr. This Lonely Mountain Sword Horde is in Chongling." The old temple attendant had weathered many storms, but when he heard this, he was still greatly shocked. "I hope Mr. can help me." Bai Shanshui bowed deeply to the old temple attendant and said, "I do not dare to think about reviving the country, but this is the only hope to prevent many Wei people from becoming homeless and having no place to sleep in the open." When he bowed deeply, it carried the heavy aura of a country. The old temple attendant took a deep breath and straightened his body. He didn't directly agree, but narrowed his eyes and said, "What kind of things did you get?" Bai Shanshui also straightened. Without another word, he took out an item from his sleeve and held it in front of the old temple attendant. The old temple attendant's pupils contracted, and waves rose in his heart. Lying in Bai Shanshui's palm was a black gold jade seal. This jade talisman wasn't complete, missing several corners. There were many lines that seemed to have been randomly carved on the surface. However, at this moment, in this old temple attendant's eyes, these lines all floated up from the jade talisman, moreover extending endlessly in the air. They were like mountains and rivers, floating outwards. There were no characters on the jade seal, and no markings related to the Lonely Mountain Sword Horde. But this old temple attendant knew this represented the Lonely Mountain Sword Horde. Because he had seen a jade seal like this before, or rather, what he had seen was one of the missing corners of this jade seal. It seems that all the effort was worth it. While the old temple attendant did not say anything, Bai Shanshui could confirm many things from his appearance. He sighed softly and said, "I faintly see that the lines on this jade seal are related to the geography of Chongling. But my talent is not enough, and I cannot completely comprehend the mysteries. Sir, you once studied the fragments of this jade seal with that person, and successfully found some of the Lonely Mountain Sword Horde's treasures. I think you can help me this time. The truth is not as the outside world says." The old temple attendant looked away from the jade seal, took a deep breath, and said slowly to Bai Shanshui. Bai Shanshui's body shook slightly. The jade seal that appeared in the past had always been in the treasury of the Clan Law Bureau. When I was the bureau chief of the Clan Law Bureau, I did not know that this jade seal was the map of the Lonely Mountain Sword Horde. I only felt that it was very special and seemed to match the geography of Chongling, but I could not understand it. The old temple attendant said slowly. I asked him to study it. Later, we found that the lines on the jade seal were not the geography of Chongling, but the flow of many special primal energies of the universe in Chongling. Bai Shanshui took a breath and said softly, "The flow of primal energies of the universe?" The old temple attendant nodded and said, The map of the Lonely Mountain Sword Horde is not marked by geography, but by the flow of primal energies of the universe to indicate where the horde is. Maybe the person who left this map in the past felt that if one's cultivation was not enough and did not have enough comprehension, they were not worthy of obtaining anything from the Lonely Mountain Sword Horde. Bai Shan Shui was silent for a moment. He looked up at the distant Chongling and sighed softly. In other words, I must stay in this disgusting Chongling? Chapter 124. Multiple carriages moved through the streets of Chongling at a moderate pace. The person sitting in the leading carriage was Mo Qinggong. Suddenly, a look of vigilance appeared in his eyes. A carriage was passing through a nearby alley towards them. He remembered that the person driving the carriage was Jing Mazong, one of Wang Taishu's people. But he had been in the Divinity Bureau for many years and learned from many bloody lessons that he could not completely trust anyone. However, when the curtains of the carriage were lifted in the distance, his slightly furrowed brows relaxed. When he was a little closer, he said with a gentle expression, "Why have you also come?" The people in the carriage were Ding Ning and Shini. Hearing Mo Qinggong's words, Ding Ning did not seem to feel the terror of this vicious dog of the Divinity Bureau. He flashed into Mo Qinggong's carriage and motioned for Shun Yi to follow. "Official Mo, long time no see. Your complexion looks good in the new year." Ding Ning bowed slightly to Mo Qinggong and said, "I thought that official might want to hear some details, so I came first. It will be difficult to find the people of Fish Market, so I brought my junior sect brother, who is also present. If official can ask clearly, you do not need to waste effort to involve the people of Fish Market." Mo Qinggong looked amiably at Ding Ning without the harshness he usually showed to his subordinates. He smiled slightly and said, "You are really smart. Even if you did not come, I would still find you." Ding Ning smiled and said, "How can I have official come find me? Of course, I came myself." Mo Qinggong examined Ding Ning for a moment and sighed softly. "In the last half-year, you can be said to be extremely famous in Chongling. Ever since you entered White Goat Cave, you are the young genius whose reputation rose the fastest in Chongling. Reality proved that my eyes were not wrong back then. But now, it seems that even if I had taken you as a student, you would not have grown so quickly. Who would have thought that Shui Wangxiu, that rotten old man, was actually a great grandmaster who stepped into the seventh realm in one step?" "Lord Mo, do you have any clues?" Ding Ning said softly in distress. "I am just an ordinary youth. I have no enemies in Chongling. Why have so many cultivators come to kill me?" Mo Qinggong was both angry and amused. He shouted, "I haven't interrogated you yet, and you come to interrogate me." Shui Wangxiu had revealed his cultivation state on the official road, acted so awe-inspiring in Jushan district, and fought with General Liang at the gate of the Tiger Wolf Army's North Camp. Who in the world didn't know about this? You were present at all of this, and you are the fastest cultivator to reach Realm 3 in Chongling. Are you still an ordinary youth? You should be more careful in the future." After a pause, Mo Qinggong warned seriously, "Just your connection to Wang Taishu may bring you much trouble. If it's a disaster, it can't be avoided," Ding Ning said calmly. "We still have to rely on you to find out." Hearing this, Mo Qinggong smiled self-deprecatingly. Even he needed a backer like Chief Inspector Chen to establish himself in Chongling. Most of the time, he had no choice. A youth from an ordinary family like Ding Ning, even if he showed some outstanding talent, could only go with the flow. He had no room to make his own choices. He started to ask about the details of Fish Market. Perhaps he felt that the people of Fish Market and the identities of the three cultivators were not important, or he was deliberately avoiding it. In the process of questioning, he did not even ask who had acted in Fish Market. When the questioning ended, the carriage passed through a patch of poplar forest on the outskirts of Chongling. A patch of low houses built along a branch of the Wei River appeared in Ding Ning's sight. "This is the great floating water prison?" Ding Ning muttered. "It doesn't look like much." Few people did not treat Mo Qinggong as a terrifying official of the Divinity Bureau and talked to him like a normal person. So when he heard Ding Ning's mutterings, he only smiled slightly and did not care. His tense emotions finally relaxed, because no one in Chongling would dare to do anything near the great floating water prison. Are there many unusual places underground? Ding Ning grew even more curious. He looked at Mo Qinggong and asked, "Can you take me in to take a look?" Mo Qinggong stilled, and his expression hardened. He said, "You want to go in and take a look?" Ding Ning nodded and said, "Because I heard that the most heavily guarded place in Chongling is not the Imperial Palace, but the great floating water prison." Such childish words. Mo Qinggong glanced at him and said disdainfully, "You think that anyone can enter the great floating water prison as they wish?" Ding Ning glanced at him and frowned slightly. "Even you cannot take me in?" "It is not that I cannot take you in, but that even I cannot enter. Even I do not qualify," Mo Qinggong sneered. Mo Qinggong sneered. "This water prison has existed since the time of the previous emperor. Ever since then, it has been continuously strengthened and repaired. Almost every powerful formation and restriction that the Qin dynasty cultivators have comprehended will be added in. Even if they were criminals, only the truly grand characters would be qualified to be imprisoned in this place. Even this Realm 5 survivor did not have the right to be locked up here. Realm 5 is not qualified. Then what kind of person qualifies to be imprisoned here?" Ding Ning and Shun Yi looked at each other. Mo Qinggong said, "Of course, a true great rebel. Someone who escapes like a dragon into the sea and cannot be controlled. A great rebel like Bai Shan Shui." Ding Ning frowned and said, "But only those important figures of that level are qualified to be imprisoned here. Lord Mo, you have such a high official position. How can you not be qualified to enter and try the case? Then who is qualified to try the case inside? Don't the Astrology Bureau and Divinity Bureau rank above the other bureaus in terms of investigating cases?" Children are so curious. Mo Qinggong jumped off the carriage and motioned for the Divinity Bureau official driving the carriage to send Ding Ning and Shunyi back. At the same time, he said, "I have finished some procedures and can only enter the great floating water prison when it is time to try cases. The person in charge here is official Shun Xian, but you will not know him even if I tell you." "Shun Xian?" Ding Ning's heart trembled again. But in front of someone like Mo Qinggong, his expression remained absolutely calm and did not change at all. He waited until the carriage carrying him and Shunyi turned around and entered the poplar forest. Only then did he close his eyes tiredly. He thought back to every detail of that building. At the same time, he said coldly inside, "Shun Xian, I had not expected you to survive and become Prime Minister Yan's dog." In the years when the Yuanwu Emperor had ascended the throne, those at the center of the bloody storm, if not the top people of the time, were people related to those top people. Even if they were just some of the followers and hanger-ons of those heavens chosen, many of them had obtained extraordinary opportunities in that shocking change and stepped onto the stage of power. Shun Xian was different. In the last decade or so, he had not shown his face in Chongling. But before the Yuanwu Emperor ascended the throne, he had been the stargazing general and was in charge of all the turrets. Chongling did not have outer walls. The giant turrets that stood in Chongling looked down at all of Chongling and observed the movements of Chongling. The light from the turrets could quickly guide the direction of the troops or cultivators moving through the streets. But in an important battle, Shun Xian had pointed in the wrong direction for a group of cultivators who had played a decisive role. Those cultivators should have been his friends. But when those cultivators followed his directions and charged to the place of reinforcements as quickly as possible, they found what was waiting for them were thousands of formation chariots. In the past, Shun Xian had been very strong. Now he was likely at least Realm 7 second class. A person like this was guarding this place. Even someone of Mo Qinggong's level could only enter at a specific time. Ding Ning knew he had to be more patient and slow down. Today, he had used this opportunity. While he had not been able to enter the great floating water prison, he had learned some useful information. At least, he had seen the present great floating water prison at close range, so while he felt bitter inside, he could only speak softly to comfort himself. Chapter 125. The Divinity Bureau carriage carrying Ding Ning and Shun Yi slowly drove back to Falling Parasol. There were already people waiting for him in the shabby alley decorated with lanterns and banners. Ding Ning saw Nangong Kaishu, Xia Chongsheng, and Su Hashan sitting respectfully next to Shui Wangshu and talking to Shui Wangshu. Seeing Ding Ning get off the carriage, Xia Chongsheng was the first to stand up and said excitedly, "Brother-in-law, you have returned?" Seeing Shun Yi get off the carriage with Ding Ning, Xia Chongsheng stilled. "Why have you come?" Shun Yi looked at Xia Chongsheng with a grimace.
Do not call me by that name.
"You know I do not like it." Ding Ning looked calmly at Shun Yi and said, "Shun Yi is the newest disciple of White Goat Cave. He is my junior sect brother now." Now it was Xia Chongsheng's turn to have a grimace. He said, "How can this be? He has ill intentions towards my sister." Ding Ning frowned and said, "Then I can facilitate it." Shun Yi's eyes widened, and he looked in joy at Ding Ning. "Senior sect brother Ding Ning, really?" Xia Chongsheng said angrily, "What are you so happy about? You know my sister's temper." Shun Yi stilled. His eyes darkened, and he felt his chest tighten. "You only know how to fool around. You are so childish in front of Shui." Nangong Kaishu scolded Xia Chongsheng, and then looked at the departing Divinity Bureau carriage. She asked Ding Ning, "Why is it the Divinity Bureau's carriage that returns after such a major incident?" Hearing Nangong Kaishu's words, Ding Ning knew that Shui Wangshu must have told them what had happened in Fish Market. He nodded and said, "That is Mo Qinggong's care for me. The Divinity Bureau's carriage sending me back is to tell others that the Divinity Bureau has interfered. Those who want to act against me should restrain themselves. As for the person who tried to assassinate me, the Divinity Bureau is investigating as well. I don't think it's that simple." Su Hashan lowered his voice and said gravely, "You might have been dragged into the conflict between the Imperial Court. You have to be careful from now on." He and Nangong Kaishu both came from famous families. Their foresight was more profound than ordinary people. Ding Ning felt his kindness and nodded. "However, you are not simple either. 2 Realm 5 and 1 Realm 4 cultivator. If it were anyone else, they would have been killed long ago." Ever since the Sword Trial Festival, Xia Chongsheng had admired Ding Ning. He looked at Ding Ning with even more admiration. "If this news spreads, your position on the Sword Trials Book of Talents will not just be 72. You will rise greatly." "Why have all of you come today?" Ding Ning said with a frown. "What is the Sword Trials Book of Talents?" "Of course, we have to visit friends in the new year. Even if you are not my brother-in-law now, do not be so unreasonable." Xia Chongsheng casually took out a thin booklet and handed it to Ding Ning. He said, "In a month or 2, copies of this will be everywhere. It will not be valuable. However, this is the first batch. It took me a lot of effort." Nangong Kaishu smiled slightly and explained softly, "This Sword Trials Book of Talents is an evaluation made by the Honyang Academy from all the cultivation places that qualify to attend the Min Mountain Sword Trials, as well as all the young talents who have been recommended. Then this is a book equivalent to a ranking of strength." "There is something like this?" Shun Yi was shocked and asked in disbelief. Xia Chongsheng said 72 before. "Does the Honyang Academy only rank Ding Ning 72 in this book? Is this accurate?" Nangong Kaishu explained, "The Honyang Academy is not a cultivation place. It is an academy of the Bureau of Revenue. Some of the statistical matters, especially the registration and compilation of the cultivators of the Qin dynasty, are all done by them. Even for some cultivators who are not in cultivation places, they will do their best to investigate the latest situation and record the information. Now, the scope has been narrowed to the young talents who may attend the Min Mountain Sword Trials. The book they compile should be the most authoritative. Of course, this is just an evaluation based on cultivation and swordsmanship. It does not consider how well they can perform in battle and counter each other." Chun Yi's face suddenly paled. At this time, he admitted that he was not as good as Ding Ning. Even if this was just a basic comprehensive evaluation, there were so many experts in Chongling. At this time, Zhang Yi came out of the kitchen with hot tea. He heard Nangong Kaishu answer Shun Yi and saw Shun Yi's pale face. He could not help but comfort. Little sect brother, Chongling is very large and has many people, many times more than Guangzhou. Chen Yi didn't say anything. At this time, he was just thinking if even Ding Ning was only ranked 72nd, then who was ranked first by the Hanyang Academy's people? Who is the most outstanding young talent? Zhang Yi was also very curious. He first poured a cup of hot tea for Shui Wangxiu to warm his hands. Then he looked at the thin book in Ding Ning's hand and asked, "Who is ranked first? Is it Dugu Bai of the Dugu Marquisate establishment?" Dugu Liangsheng of the Dugu Marquisate establishment used primal energies of the universe and battle energy as medicine. His son, Dugu Bai, was famous in Chongling. Almost all the cultivation places in Chongling had heard before the year that he had returned from the Mabe and prepared to attend the Min Mountain Sword Trials. I originally thought it was Dugu Bai, but when I opened it, I found it was not. Xia Chongxing blinked at Zhang Yi's words and said proudly, "Then who is it?" Even Shui Wangxiu stilled slightly and looked at the thin book in Ding Ning's hand. Even in his view, the child of the Dugu Marquisate establishment who is definitely in Realm 4 should be ranked first. Ding Ning sat down next to Shui Wangxiu and flipped to the first page with a serious expression. Since he had decided to win at the Min Mountain Sword Trials and give Shui Wangxiu the greatest glory, then everyone in this little book was his opponent. He had heard many things about Dugu Bai. Even if he took out all his hidden strength, with his present cultivation, Dugu Bai should be a very threatening opponent. Now, Dugu Bai was not first. This meant that the Min Mountain Sword Trials was not completely without variables for him, and he could not obtain it just because he wanted it. First, Liang Hong. But the moment he saw the name, Ding Ning was slightly startled. This was definitely a very rare surname. Zhang Yi could not help but widen his eyes. He had never heard of this name before. He couldn't help but quickly read on. Estimated cultivation. Realm 4 second class. Cultivation place. Overseas islands. This thin book of talents did not reveal much information. It only recorded these three things about each cultivator. Overseas islands referred to the island countries that the Qin dynasty often traded with and produced spirit medicines. These island countries were barren. After hundreds of years of trade, their lifelines were firmly in the hands of the Qin dynasty. While there were cultivators, few cultivators would come to Chongling. It was likely the first time someone had participated in the Min Mountain Sword Trials like this, and this person was highly valued by the Hanyang Academy and ranked first. Ding Ning frowned slightly. He looked up at Xia Chongsheng, Nangong Kaishu, and the others and asked, "Who recommended this person?" Hearing this, Zhang Yi recovered from his shock. He immediately felt that Ding Ning had grasped the crux of the matter. For a cultivator from an overseas country of the Qin dynasty to participate in the Min Mountain Sword Trials, he most likely had a great backer. Hearing Ding Ning's question, Xia Chongsheng was slightly proud. He said softly, "I have asked around. I am not certain, but he is likely to be from Jiaodong Commandery." Ding Ning's expression darkened slightly. Zhang Yi's expression changed. Someone from the Empress family? Jiaodong Commandery was a large commandery of the Qin dynasty along the coast. Everyone in the Qin dynasty knew that while Empress Zhengxiu was from the Qin dynasty, she was able to become the empress because of her cultivation, beauty, and intelligence. The other most important reason was that her paternal family, the Zheng family, had astounding power in Jiaodong Commandery. In reality, before the Yuanwu emperor ascended the throne, Jiaodong Commandery was the territory of the Qin dynasty in name, but in reality, it was like an independent dynasty under the Zheng family's jurisdiction. Before the Yuanwu emperor ascended the throne, the Zheng family even had some secret agreements with the Qi dynasty. The Yuanwu emperor was able to ascend the throne largely due to the Zheng family's support. The earliest armored fleets of the Qin dynasty belonged to the Zheng family. At that time, the Zheng family had the ability to dominate the seas. The Hongyang College is filled with stubborn old scholars. They will not give the empress face. Xia Chongxing looked at Ding Ning and said seriously, "So this Liang Hong should have power and may have astounding accomplishments overseas. You have to be careful." Ding Ning nodded and flipped to the second page. The name on the second page was still not Dugabai's. Second, Yi Haoren. Estimated cultivation. Realm 4 second class. Cultivation place. Li Lingjuan's establishment. The origins of this young talent were clear at a glance. Thinking of the snow dandelion sword he encountered at the sword trial festival, Ding Ning's gaze turned cold. He said in a slightly disdainful tone, Li Lingjun really is meticulous and has people he can bring out at any time. But the nobility of Chongling are really broad-minded to let the people of Li Lingjuan's establishment attend the Min Mountain Sword trials. Nangong Kaishu looked at him, hesitated, and said softly, Li Lingjun may return to the Chu dynasty to take over the throne, so it is possible that some of the nobility of Chongling have some conditions with him. This should only be a small part of the transactions between important people. Zhang Yi frowned slightly. The trade-offs between the truly important figures in the imperial court were too complicated. Those who had not reached a high position would not be able to understand them. Thus, he had no interest in these things. He only wanted to know if the third person was Dugabai. Yet when Ding Ning flipped to the third page, what appeared in his sight was still not Dugabai, but a name that he, Ding Ning, and Xue Wangxu would never have expected. Chapter 126. Third. Ku Shichuan. Estimated cultivation. Realm 3 first class. Cultivation place. Shadow Mountain Sword School. Zhang Yi looked at the name on the third page and said in shock and puzzlement, how is this possible? Xia Chongqing shrugged and said, we did not believe it at first sight because the fourth is Dugabai. We did not believe that he could rank ahead of Dugabai. Also, the fourth Dugabai has Realm 4 second class cultivation. How is this possible? Shunyi asked in puzzlement. Even he, who came from Guangzhong, knew that the Shadow Mountain Sword School was not especially famous. The old scholars of the Hongyang Academy would not make a single mistake in a long scroll. Of course, they would not make such a shallow mistake. Xia Chongqing glanced at him and said, even during the sword trial festival, we did not feel that he had any special presence. He only had the desire to compete at the Min Mountain Sword trials, but did not have the presence of someone who was better than him. So the only possibility is that he had a special encounter after the sword trial festival. Hearing the discussion of these young people and seeing the name on the third page, Xue Wangxu could not help but frown slightly. He said, the Shadow Mountain Sword School has a unique sword wall. Nangong Kaishu and the others immediately looked at him. Xue Wangxu continued, that sword wall is said to be a relic of the Yu dynasty. Regardless of the truth, that thing is above all the sword hoards of the Shadow Mountain Sword School. In the history books of Chongling, only 1 or 2 people from the Shadow Mountain Sword School succeeded in comprehending sword manuals or cultivation methods from that sword wall. But those 2 people became grandmasters. Zhang Yi was stunned and asked, Cave Master, you mean that Ku Shichuan comprehended something from that sword wall? Xue Wangxu rolled his eyes and asked, do you think there are other possibilities? Zhang Yi said embarrassedly, my true essence cultivation hasn't skyrocketed. It can't be that I got some powerful spirit Dan. There doesn't seem to be any other possibility. Sis. Ding Ning. Why don't you care at all? At this time, Xia Chongqing looked at Ding Ning in surprise. He subconsciously wanted to call him brother-in-law, but after the first word left his mouth, he felt that it was wrong and immediately changed it. Ding Ning was surprised at the beginning, but he didn't have any special emotions at all. He had already flipped to the next page. Ding Ning did not even raise his head. He said calmly, it doesn't matter. Xia Chongqing immediately misunderstood his meaning and said unhappily, while we may not meet, I really want to see you meet him at the sword conference and defeat him. Ding Ning saw that Dugubai's name was indeed on the 4th page. He turned to the 5th page and said, if I meet him, I will defeat him. Xia Chongqing, Shen Yi, and the others were stunned. Good, very domineering. After being stunned for a few breaths of time, Xia Chongqing suddenly laughed and clapped his hands. This is indeed your temperament. I like this kind of unreasonable confidence of yours. 5th, Chen Liqiu. Estimated cultivation. Realm 4 second class. Cultivation place. White Du Courtyard. 6th, Su Lianhua. Estimated cultivation. Realm 4 second class. Cultivation place. Su Marquisate establishment. 7th, Exian. Estimated cultivation. Realm 4 second class. Cultivation place. Mind chamber sect. Ding Ning flipped page by page with a calm expression. He quickly reached the last page. Yet Shun Yi's face grew paler. This book of talents compiled by the Honyang Academy only listed the first 120. Only after the 17th on this book were the estimated cultivations below Realm 4. Among the young geniuses participating in the Min Mountain Sword trials, 16 of the first 17 were in Realm 4. Shin Yi had always felt that his cultivation progress was fast, but seeing this book, he felt that he was nothing to the entire Qin dynasty. Originally, he had thought that Ding Ning was ranked 72nd Empress Dowager. But now, it seemed that being ranked in this book was an impressive matter. How is it? Do you feel pressure? Looking at the calm Ding Ning, Shui Wengshu smiled slightly and said, even compared to previous years, there seem to be more powerful people this year. There is no difference. Ding Ning closed the book and turned to look at Xia Chongsheng. How come I have not heard of such a small book in previous years? Xia Chongsheng smiled slightly and said, no matter how old a scholar is, he still needs to eat. The maintenance of a school also requires a lot of silver. I heard that this year, the silver allocated by the palace treasury to many places below has been greatly reduced, so they all need to think of ways to make money to supplement it. This thin booklet is worth thousands of taels of gold. Ding Ning frowned slightly and said, there have been no great disasters in the last few years. They could have given more. Why did they reduce it? Xia Chongsheng thought that he had done his homework before coming, but he had not thought about this question and stilled. Nangong Kaishu and Su Heshan exchanged a look. They had not considered this question at all. But when they heard Ding Ning mention it, the two of them who came from general families felt there was a problem. It should be because of the Deer Mountain Conference. After thinking for a few breaths, Nangong Kaishu said, previously, the time for the Qin dynasty to make an alliance with the Chu, Yan, and Qi dynasties is up. There are still 3 months until the Deer Mountain Conference to make a new alliance. Even if the Qin dynasty is powerful and the emperor may have entered Realm 8, the 3 dynasties will not dare to not make a new alliance. But to prevent any changes, they must be prepared to fight. How would the 3 dynasties dare to fight? Although he felt that Nangong Saishu's words were reasonable, Xia Chongsheng couldn't help but mock. The Chu emperor is trapped in a gentle land all day. The Yan emperor is famous for his caution. As for the Qi, it is somewhat dangerous. Their ghostly army is difficult to deal with. But how can their national power compare to the Qin dynasty? If they really fight, we will drag them to death. Ding Ning looked at the proud Xia Chongsheng and shook his head. This is not a question of whether they want to fight or not. Xia Chongsheng paused. No one present was stupid. They all heard the meaning in Ding Ning's words. Little Zhang Yi opened his mouth out of habit. He wanted to call Qin Yi his little junior brother, but he suddenly realized that his little junior brother was now Qin Yi, so he was not used to calling him little junior brother. Junior brother, do you think His Majesty will want to fight? If you and 3 people are fighting for something, and your cultivation is the same, but suddenly your cultivation is a realm higher than the other 3, will you take the chance to threaten them and force them to take something out? Ding Ning looked at Zhang Yi and asked. Zhang Yi thought and said naturally, this does not seem good. I will not. When the others heard Zhang Yi's answer, they were speechless, as though they had choked on their water. So you are soft-hearted, Ding Ning said. You will not, but other people will. Nangong Kaishu frowned and said, yes, if the emperor is really in Realm 8, whether to fight or not is a question of whether he wants to or not, and not like before, whether the other 3 dynasties want to or not. Your views have always been brilliant. It is a waste to just be a cultivator. Shui Wengshu, who had not spoken for a long time, spoke. He looked emotionally at Ding Ning and said, this time, the Deer Mountain Conference will be very different from the past. There will be great changes. This year's Min Mountain Sword trials will be very different because of this small book. Many of the people on this book will not be on it when the Min Mountain Sword trials truly begin. Shen Yi understood the first part of Shui Wangxi's words, but not the latter. He stilled and said, "The Min Mountain Sword trials will be just half a year from now. The people on this book are all in Realm 3. Their cultivation cannot change so much in such a short time. Why will many people not be on it then?" Inferior is inferior. Xie Chongsheng glanced at Chen Yi contemptuously and said, "If you were also in this book, and you saw someone you thought was inferior to you in front of you, wouldn't you be unconvinced and challenge him? If your words are vicious enough, and you lose miserably, will the loser have the face to attend the Min Mountain Sword trials this time?" Chen Yi's eyes widened as he finally understood what was going on. Which young talent wasn't proud and arrogant? Unless there was a clear gap between them and Dugu Bai and the others, how could they possibly be convinced? Thinking of the consequences this small book would cause, he couldn't help but say in shock, "This book of talents is like a challenge book. Many people will not be able to resist challenging those ranked at the front, so this year's Min Mountain Sword trials is like the preliminaries have already started." After saying this, he understood the disdain in Xie Chongsheng's words. He glanced at Xie Chongsheng and Ding Ning and said humbly and seriously, "Of course I am not as good as senior sect brother Ding Ning." Xie Chongsheng snorted and was embarrassed to say more. He turned to look at Ding Ning and said seriously, "This is the greatest reason Kaishu called us to give Cave Master a New Year's greeting and see you. This is not good for you. If you start early, you will not have enough time to cultivate. Even if it is up to you whether you accept other people's challenges, it will be troublesome. It will waste time and effort, and you may have a bad reputation." Ding Ning shook his head and said calmly, "I will not have a bad reputation because I will not refuse other people's challenges." Xie Chongsheng, Nangong Kaishu, and the others stilled. "Apologies, I have to use you as an example." Ding Ning said to Shen Yi and then said, "Cultivation does not have to rely on meditation. I will not refuse other people's challenges, but I can be unscrupulous and win some things from other people." Shen Yi thought of the 3 young grass he had paid a great price to find after losing. He was not angry, and his eyes lit up. Shui Wangxi chuckled. "A very interesting idea. Ding Ning, you finally know how to respect your teachers. You know that I will be bored if I have too few things to do. Also, those ranked at the front would be embarrassed to challenge you, right?" Ding Ning smiled slightly and said, "The more you win, the more glorious you will be. You feel you are certain to win? Could it be that your name is Chongsheng?" Xie Chongsheng said with a frown. But in the next moment he smiled again. "But I still like your unreasonable confidence." Chapter 127. There was an old library in the eastern suburbs of Chongling that was under the jurisdiction of the warden's office. Most of the books stored inside were maps and books on hydrology. Usually there were no people here. When some of the ditches were being cleaned, some officials would come to check some maps to avoid making mistakes or blocking some underground ditches that were only used to prevent flooding. The sky gradually darkened. A tall and brawny man sat openly in the hall of this old library. He placed a charcoal stove in front of him and boiled a pot of mutton soup. He held a wine gourd and drank by himself. His cup was dripping, and he had an arrogant presence as though no one else was present. The wind blew and the charcoal fire dimmed slightly. A black-robed advisor appeared at the door with a dark expression. He shouted with a cold expression, "Fanjua, you should know that my general is taking great risks for you to come and go as you please in Chongling. But who did you find to be so arrogant and ignorant as to kill people in Fish Market? What intentions do you have?" Seeing the black-robed advisor so angry, the brawny man stilled slightly. But when he heard the shout, his expression immediately darkened. Murderousness came out of his vicious eyes without reason. He sneered, "Cheap Humo, you're someone who went through life and death with Liang Lian and climbed out of a pile of corpses. You are just angry, but you do not even know your own identity and ours. Who do you think we are? I am sitting here right now. My palace master is reading upstairs. You dare to be so rude and shout. If you disturb him, do you think I will not dare to kill you?" This arrogant and vicious man was one of the great rebels of Cloudwater Palace, Fanjua. The palace master he spoke of was naturally Bai Shui. Chi Pumo had been furious, but when he saw Fanju's vicious gaze and heard the words, palace master, his heart turned cold. He immediately understood that the other was a reckless and unrestrained existence. The magical power of the three words Bai Shui instantly squeezed out a fine layer of cold sweat on his back. He took a deep breath and said, I had not expected Palace Master Bai to be here. I have been rude, but you are entrusted by others and naturally have to be loyal. Now, your people have failed to assassinate and left one alive in the hands of the Divinity Bureau. I do not know what the consequences will be. You actually failed? Fanju put away his murderousness and looked coldly at him. Only now did he start to consider the advisor's words. Fugitives naturally have the ability to fugitives. Those three are truly poisonous snakes, not the arrogant and ignorant trash you speak of. One of your provincial governors were assassinated by the three of them. They must have bad luck. Otherwise, with their strength, what problem would there be in Fish Market to kill a youth who just entered Realm 3? Chi Pumo calmed down slightly and said slowly, in the first year of Yuanwu, the Empress wanted to flatten the underground powers of Fish Market in one go. But in the end, she stopped. Other than some old people in court, there must be grandmasters in Fish Market, and not ordinary grandmasters. The three poisonous snakes you speak of must have underestimated Fish Market just like you. One of them has been sent to the Great Floating Water Prison by the Divinity Bureau. Great Floating Water Prison? Fanjua looked disdainfully at him and said, they use a sledgehammer to kill a chicken. What can they get out of sending him to the Great Floating Water Prison? Even if they get something, they will not be able to trace it back to you and Liang Lian. What do you have to worry about? Chi Pumo was silent for a moment and said softly, compared to this survivor, I am more worried about your rash actions. I am a dragon crossing the river and do wild things. How can I be as cautious as you? Fanjua smiled arrogantly and said, just a gangster in Chongling. I will personally help you get rid of him. Thinking that the other did have such arrogant strength, and that Bai Shui was upstairs, Chi Pumo did not say anything else and left. Murderousness came and went under the old book, and the words were sharp. Upstairs, however, was quiet as usual. Most of the books on the bookshelves were old, and the words and pictures on the pages were blurry. Bai Shui was sitting on the ground under the east window, looking at the world outside in deep thought. While he had received guidance, he had not made any progress in his comprehension. He could not sense the connection between the lines on the jade seal in his hand and the primal energies of the universe. But at this time, Bai Shui was not in a hurry. He was in a strange state. He faintly felt that comprehending this jade seal was a cultivation process he had to go through. Those profound lines that stretched endlessly into the surrounding space, comprehending the mysteries of these lines and the primal energies of the universe, seemed to have a great connection to Realm 8. As the spiritual pillar of all the Wei people, a person that all the dynasties in the world feared, his talent was not something that many people could match. But even he had difficulty moving forward after reaching Realm 7. But now, a path seemed to have appeared in the night. He only needed to slowly explore and feel this path. So even though he was in the most dangerous Chongling, he, who was in a wondrous state, was calmer than at any other time. Because it was truly a rare moment of absolute peace, there were even many pure white and sparkling water droplets that naturally appeared around his body. As if they were alive, they slowly moved rhythmically, enveloping his body in a layer of strange radiance. Not long after Chi Pumo, who did not hold a position in the Tiger Wolf army but was Liang Lian's most trusted aide, left the old book building, a straight figure suddenly appeared in front of him. Chi Pumo immediately paused, nodded and said, General, there is no need to remind or threaten them to do anything. They know what to do. Liang Lian, who appeared in front of him, said coolly, also, they are not people that can be judged with common sense. Both them and the people of the Zhao Sword Furnace do not care about life and death. They are people that, if they can pass Realm 8 and kill the person they want to kill with one blow, they will be happy even if they die. In the bedroom in the backyard of the Falling Parasol wine shop, Ding Ning, after bathing in hot water, was carefully applying the whale jade ointment to his body. This was a kind of slightly yellow and translucent ointment. Just from the soft popping sounds coming from Ding Ning's periosteum as he applied the ointment, it was possible to imagine the power of this rare ointment. But this ointment had a faint smell of the sea and was not very pleasant to smell. So even through a thick curtain, Zhang Sun Qianxue could not help but frown. Sensing Zhang Sun Qianxue's displeasure, Ding Ning smiled slightly and said softly, "I am not used to this smell. Tomorrow, I will help you buy some nice-smelling incense. This whale jade ointment can prevent people from suspecting your body. Your body is not as weak as it looks." Zhang Sun Qianxue did not respond to his words and said coldly, "But Sikong Lin gave you such a great gift. What problem does he have?" Ding Ning shook his head. "I do not know, but while Sikong Lin's position is high, he is not as extravagant as the marquisate establishments. This gift is naturally more important to him. Presumably, he wants to bet on me. But as for what I will help him in the future, I will only know when I reach a certain level of cultivation." Zhang Sun Qianxue was silent for a moment and said, "Even an assassination like this was not able to harm you. It seems you are more confident than I imagined." Ding Ning's expression grew grave. He said seriously in the darkness, "I am already walking too fast, but you cannot be faster. You need to be more patient. Do not think that my previous choice was correct because this is a matter of luck. If not for Shui Wangshu, I would not have had so many fortuitous encounters since I entered White Goat Cave, and I would not have my present cultivation." Zhang Sun Qianxue did not respond to his words like she usually did. She said coldly, "The Min Mountain Sword trials this year produced that kind of small booklet. You have seen it. How confident are you?" Ding Ning frowned and said, "Up until now, I do not have much confidence. I need to think of ways to comprehend some things I can use openly. White Goat Cave's sword manuals are not enough. When I came to the Min Mountain Sword trials, my cultivation was Realm 3 second class at most. So I need to think of a way. This is slightly troublesome." Zhang Sun Qianxue said, "Even you do not have the confidence to fight above your realm. Are the people in the booklet really so powerful?" Ding Ning sneered and said, "The most powerful people may not be on that list because I know the Empress methods. She usually has ambushes and backups, and they're more powerful." Zhang Sun Qianxue thought and felt that it was too troublesome to understand these people's personalities. So she was too lazy to think, closed her eyes, and started to cultivate. Ding Ning sensed her breathing and grew silent. She was not so complicated, or rather, too simple. But the simpler she was, the more valuable she was. On the morning of the next day, Ding Ning woke up like usual and started to cook porridge. But to Ding Ning's surprise, Zhang Yi's voice broke through the morning silence. "What is it?" Ding Ning opened the door to the shop and looked at Zhang Yi, who was waiting anxiously at the door. "Cave Master is up. Xie Chongsheng and the others sent carriages to pick them up. They say there are people in the booklet fighting in public. Junior sect brother, hurry. If Cave Master does not see it in time, he will be angry again." As Zhang Yi spoke, he dragged Ding Ning towards the door of Shui Wangshu's little courtyard. Ding Ning frowned slightly. "Who is it?" Chapter 128. They say it is Chun Lufeng, ranked 37th, against Fong Wuk, ranked 35th. Zhang Yi was a gentleman. While he feared Shui Wangshu would be angry, he still asked after taking 2 steps, "Is there anything going on in the shop? Should I tell your aunt?" Ding Ning shook his head and said, "No need. With Zhang Sun Qianxue's cultivation, nothing in this alley could escape her perception." While the porridge on the stove was not boiling, it did not matter. The Xie family was wealthy in Guangzhou. Xie Chongsheng usually spent money like water and was very ostentatious. At this time, there were 2 grand carriages waiting in front of Shui Wangshu's courtyard. The horses pulling the carriages were all green windchaser foals from Longxi County. Their fur was glossy and shiny, without a single trace of impurity. The carriages were decorated with white jade and gold leaf, giving off a grand and majestic air. Shui Wangshu and Shun Yi were already on one of the carriages. Seeing Zhang Yi anxiously drag Dingning over, Shui Wangshu couldn't help but smile in relief. It was worth it to have a few disciples who were so anxious for their whims when they were old. Xie Changsheng had arranged well. There was even food and wine in the carriages. When Zhang Yi and Ding Ning got on, the drivers of the two carriages started to drive at their fastest speed. Ding Ning took a piece of dry bread and slowly tore it to eat. He asked Zhang Yi, "Where are the two fighting?" Zhang Yi said, "At the Little Zhou River's chrysanthemum slope. That is not far." Ding Ning asked, "What grudges do the two have?" The Little Zhou River was a wild river in the south of Chongling. The two sides of the river were slightly high, like two small hills. Usually they were used for sheep grazing. But in the autumn, the two sides were full of chrysanthemums. Many people would go there to play. There were some stone towers used in the past to pass on military information. Now they were used as viewing platforms. For the cultivators of Chongling, this was the best place for public duels. People on both sides of the river could see the battle there clearly. I only know that Chen Lufeng is an outstanding student of Moon Sea Sword School and cultivates the Blue Sea Tide Sword. Fang Wux's teacher is Tian Hanyang of Tianjing Sword School and should cultivate the Stone Cave Sword. Zhang Yi said apologetically, "As to what grudges the two have, I fear we will only know when we arrive." Hanyang Academy's ranking of the Book of Talents was based on many factors. Chen Lufeng and Fang Wux were only ranked 37th and 35th in this public duel. But Ding Ning, who had won the Sword Trial Festival, gained the limelight with Shui Wangshu, defeated Shen Yi, and broke the cultivation record, was only ranked 72nd. Nangong Kaishu and the others did not even rank in the top 100. These 37th and 35th were existences that most young people in Chongling looked up to. In the morning, there were countless carriages parked on the two sides of the Little Zhou River. The carriages that came later were unable to stop close to the stone platforms. Seeing that the carriages he had sent to carry Shui Wangshu, Ding Ning and the others had not yet arrived, Xie Changsheng could not help but feel anxious. He said, "Why are there so many people?" Nangong Kaishu glanced at him and said, "It is because of Hanyang Academy's little booklet. If not for that booklet, there would not be so many people when the two duel. Now that this booklet is out, many young geniuses who originally had no connection with each other suddenly seem to have a connection. Those who are on the booklet naturally want to see what kind of strength the 37th and 35th place have. Those who aren't on the booklet want to know why they aren't on the booklet and see how big the gap is. They have come." At this time, Su Hashan had a joyful expression. He saw the two carriages he had sent to Falling Parasol. "We made it in time." Xie Changsheng didn't care about the others and directly shouted at the two carriages that obviously couldn't get close. Here, at this time, there were many young geniuses and people from prestigious families on the riverbank who had come to check. But few were as outstanding as Xie Changsheng. So Ding Ning easily heard Xie Changsheng's voice and saw where they were. "What are these two doing in the morning, coming here to duel?" Ding Ning asked when he came next to Xie Changsheng and the others and looked at the two figures facing each other on the stone platforms. "Supposedly, it is because of jealousy," Xie Changsheng said with disdain. Xie Changsheng said with slight disdain, "I heard that these two were once good friends. Chen Lufeng liked a girl and often asked Fan Wuk for advice. But later, Fan Wuk got together with that girl." Chen Lufeng was furious. He had originally planned to cut off all contact with Fan Wuk, but now that this little booklet is out, Chen Lufeng, who thought that Fan Wuk was weaker than him, saw that he was ranked behind him. He could not stand it and officially issued a challenge to Fan Wuk. Hearing this, Zhang Yi could not help but say seriously, "Then this Fan Wuk is wrong. A gentleman does not steal from others, much less the girl his good friend likes." Ding Ning sized up the two youths who were facing each other coldly on the opposite stone platform. One of them was dressed in black, his hair tied up with a black rope. His expression was cold, and he did not usually smile. The other young man was wearing a blue robe and looked slightly delicate and pretty. Which of these two is Chen Lufeng, and which is Fan Wuk? Ding Ning turned to look at Xie Changsheng and said, if they want many people to be witnesses, there are enough people now. Why have they not started? What are they waiting for? Xie Changsheng was also puzzled. We do not know. The two have been here for 15 minutes. Other than the few words they said at the beginning, they clearly do not agree. I was worried that Shui and you would not be able to arrive in time. I had not expected them to not start yet. As they spoke, a cool voice sounded behind Ding Ning. Apologies, please move aside. Xie Changsheng, Nangong Kaishu, and Su Hashan had occupied a good position on the bank from the start. It was directly facing the stone platform where Chen Lufeng and Fan Wuk were. It was also the top of a naturally raised mound on the river bank, close to the height of the stone platform. For a wild river that was not wide, such a straight line of sight was almost like standing on a stone platform and watching the battle. But this mound was not large and could only hold Xie Changsheng's group, Shui Wangxiu, Ding Ning, and the others. If he wanted to give way, naturally someone had to go lower. Moreover, this voice was not very polite. The moment he heard this voice, before he even turned around to see who it was, Xie Changsheng already sneered. Why should I give way? Ding Ning calmly turned around. He had seen more than Xie Changsheng and the others, and knew that it was normal for a small matter to cause conflict in a gathering place like this. What entered their sight were 3 youths about their age. 2 of them were dressed in yellow robes. Their faces were different, but they had sharp brows and bright eyes. They were very handsome. One of them was dressed in purple brocade robes. He was tall and thin, and his eyes were slightly sunken. He appeared slightly dignified. Hearing Xie Changsheng's cold laughter, the 3 young men all revealed displeased expressions. The tall and thin young man immediately laughed coldly as well, going tit for tat as he said, Why not? Could it be that you bought this piece of land? Xie Changsheng was not angry and said with slight disdain, Such a sharp tongue. It is a coincidence that you say I bought this land. My friends have just arrived. Previously, there were only the 3 of us here, and there was much empty space. But do you know why no one came to occupy this place before my friends arrived? The tall and thin youth stilled slightly, but then he sneered. Maybe you are vicious, and others do not dare to fight with you.
Wrong.
That is because other people know how to conduct themselves. They know first come, first serve. They know to respect the old and love the young. They know to respect their teachers. Xie Changsheng had shown his skill in disdain at the sword trial festival. At this time, the disdain on his face was so thick it seemed to flow out.
We were not the first to arrive.
There were some people who came first. I negotiated with them, and with a price of 1,000 gold per person, we happily reached a deal. They gave up this place to me. Now, our friends have arrived. The old people here are older than your grandfather, and the young people are younger than you. You rudely shouted from the start and wanted us to give up our place to you? Who are your teachers and parents that they did not even teach you how to conduct yourselves? The faces of the 3 arrogant youths turned red and green at the same time. For a moment, they couldn't find any reason to refute. One of the young men, who was wearing a yellow robe and had his hair tied up in a bun, said angrily, What a load of nonsense. Everyone has to give up their seats for 1,000 gold coins. Do you think we are 3 years old? Do you think we will believe anything you say? For you, this is an inconceivable matter, but for the Guanzhong Xie family, what is 1,000 gold? Xie Changsheng laughed and said, When I was 10 years old, I used my New Year's money to buy some property. Now, a year's rent is enough for me to give 1,000 gold coins to anyone I see when I'm in a good mood. If you guys can make me feel better, I might even give you 1,000 gold coins later. Guanzhong Xie family? The young man who spoke was stunned. His face turned pale, and he couldn't spit out the breath in his chest. There was only one Xie family in Guanzhong, and that Xie family was as rich as a country. There were many rumors about the Xie family's wealth in Chongling. Since the property you bought with your lucky money is enough for you to be so extravagant, why are you so afraid your sister will cut off your path to wealth? Seeing the youth unable to speak, Nangong Kaishu lowered her voice and asked in puzzlement by Xie Chongqing's ear. Although I'm really rich, I don't have that much red packet money. I'm just bragging. Xie Chongqing smiled slightly and responded softly. But this is enough to scare these 3 country bumpkins. The other clearly was a famed talent of Chongling, a descendant of a prominent family. Otherwise, they would not be so arrogant. Thinking of how Xie Chongqing called these 3 country bumpkins who had not seen the world, Nangong Kaishu couldn't help but shake her head and laugh. Sometimes, to deal with such rude people, she had to use Xie Chongqing's method of humiliation to vent her anger. However, at this time, the expression of the thin and tall youth in a dark purple robe changed. He said coldly, I was wondering who it was. So it is the useless prodigal son of the Xie family in Guangzhou. I wonder what rank he is in the Book of Talents compiled by Hongyang Academy? Xie Chongqing's expression turned cold. He said, Who are you? What is your ranking? The tall and thin youth sneered. This one is Lu Duofeng, ranked 81st. After saying this, he looked disdainfully at Xie Chongqing. He wanted to see how speechless and ashamed Xie Chongqing would be. However, what he did not expect was that Xie Chongqing looked at him with an even more pitiful gaze. He shook his head and said, Some people feel ashamed because they are ranked at the bottom, while others feel proud because they are ranked at the top. Speaking of ranking, there is one person here who is much higher than you. Xie Chongqing nodded at Ding Ning and then looked at him. He said, What are you proud of? Chapter 129. The 3 proud youths stilled. You are not as good as yourself, but you can still act so rationally after bringing out Ding Ning. You can do it. Nangong Kaishu glared at Xie Chongqing and whispered by his ear. Xie Chongqing did not feel ashamed and was slightly proud. He said, When arguing, you have to be righteous. You have to suppress others in terms of presence. You have not asked? Among the 3 arrogant youths, the thin and tall youth, Luo Duofeng, who was ranked 81 on the Book of Talents, asked with a solemn expression as he bowed to Ding Ning. Ding Ning said calmly, Green Vine Sword Academy, White Goat Cave, Ding Ning. So you are Ding Ning? Ding Ning of the Green Vine Sword Academy, ranked 72 on the Book of Talents. The gazes of the 3 arrogant youths involuntarily landed on Shui Wangshu, who was wearing a leather hat and extremely thick clothes. Looking at the attitude of the people around them towards Shui Wangshu, they immediately realized the identity of this old man. However, the expressions of the 3 of them immediately became strange. For the Guangzhou Xie family, money is like dirt. I think you must have seen the Book of Talents of Hongyang Academy. Lu Duofeng's lips curled up slightly. He pointed at the 2 youths dressed in yellow robes next to him and said, I cultivate at Mountain Sword Tower, but these 2 cultivate at Yellow Cloud Grotto Heaven. They are Zhou Xie, ranked 86 on the Book of Talents, and Xian Jianli, ranked 91. Maybe you have some impression. Zhang Yi had been suspicious when he saw the robes the 2 wore. Now that he was sure, he had a shocked expression. Yellow Cloud Grotto Heaven was a cultivation place on the same level as Shadow Mountain Sword Academy. It was much larger than White Goat Cave and Green Vine Sword Academy. As to Zhou Xie and Xian Jianli, they were famous in Chongling. The 2 had reached Realm 3 second class last year. Then they left to cultivate and went to the border between the Qin dynasty and the Yuezhi. Supposedly they had killed many bandits there. In fact, Zhang Yi couldn't figure out why the 2 of them were ranked so low. Yesterday, he had carefully read the small booklet. He thought that Ding Ning would have an impression. Unexpectedly, after hearing Lu Duofeng's introduction, Ding Ning's gaze swept across the 2 youths in yellow robes. Ding Ning said calmly and straightforwardly, No impression. Zhang Yi was stunned. Junior brother? Ding Ning turned his head to look at him and said, Why should I have an impression of those who are ranked below me? As soon as these words were spoken, Xie Chongqing immediately burst into laughter. He felt that this brother-in-law was really to his taste. Hearing this, Luo Duofeng, Zhou Xie, and Xian Jianli were furious. Xian Jianli, who had been silent all this while, sneered. Actually, we also don't understand why Hongyang Academy placed you before us. Xia Chongsheng said proudly. Do you understand the gap now? Xian Jianli said expressionlessly. No, I understand that he is ranked ahead of us because he has a rich friend like you. If Hongyang Academy does not lack money, they would not have made such a small booklet. But I am curious why you did not rank yourself. Do you feel that you are not strong enough and will only make a fool of yourself if you attend the Min Mountain Sword Trials? Xia Chongsheng immediately changed expression and said angrily, You mean that I bribed Hongyang Academy? Xian Jianli sneered. How would I know? Xia Chongsheng was furious and was about to speak when Ding Ning glanced at him and said calmly, There is nothing to argue about. Hongyang Academy is not a cultivation place, but there are many respected people inside. If such words spread, the ones to be punished in the future will not be us. Who would take the words of a child seriously? Xian Jianli was not afraid and sneered. In the end, there is no use in arguing. It all depends on whose sword is stronger. Ding Ning, since you are ranked ahead of us, if you dare to accept, I will challenge you today. Ding Ning glanced at him and did not speak. He just turned around. Xian Jianli, and the others stilled. Xian Jianli then said in a mocking tone, What? You don't dare? Since we rushed so early in the morning to see the fight between these two, and we spent so much money to buy this place, even if there is something, we have to see this fight first. Ding Ning's calm voice came from above the trio. The trio stilled again and looked over. They saw Chun Lufeng and Fong Wux's fight on the stone stage on the other side was about to start. So they were waiting for someone to deliver the unsharpened iron swords. Nangong Kaishu narrowed her eyes. She saw that someone had delivered 2 swords to the stage. Both were 3 feet long. The tips were blunt, and the 2 edges were unsharpened like black rulers. She immediately reacted. With the duo's cultivation and spirit, they naturally did not fear being wounded in the fight. So both sides used swords like this to pursue absolute fairness. These unsharpened iron swords had only a few straight seal lines and could hold vital energy to cast some sword energy. They were the swords used for the Min Mountain Sword Trials. After the preliminaries of the Min Mountain Sword Trials, there would be one elimination after another. Using this kind of unsharpened iron sword in all the fights would prevent the participating young geniuses from being seriously injured or dying. Even more importantly, people would not rely on the sword itself, but on their comprehension and use of the sword manual. Understanding why Chen Lufeng and Fong Wuk were waiting, Nangong Kaishu turned to look at Ding Ning and asked softly in puzzlement, You purposefully provoked them? Nangong Kaishu's eyes lit up. So you will really fight with them? Ding Ning nodded and said softly, I will probably choose Zhou Xie. Nangong Kaishu stilled. Just now, the person who could mock the most like Xia Chongsheng was Xian Jianli, and the one ranked at the top was Lu Duofeng. Zhou Xie was ranked in the middle of the 3. Why did Ding Ning choose this person? Let's watch the fight first. Ding Ning knew that she was puzzled, but at this time, he just looked up at the other side and said softly with a raised eyebrow. Nangong Kaishu instinctively looked over. The fight she had been waiting for had started. The gasp sounded. The one in black looks like someone owes him money. The one who attacked first is Chen Lufeng. Only now did Xia Chongsheng remember that he had not answered Ding Ning, who is Chen Lufeng, and Fong Wuk, due to the interruption of Lu Duofeng and the others. So he immediately added. In reality, there was no need for him to explain. Because as Chen Liufeng's figure moved, the black body of the windless black iron sword in his hand suddenly scattered out puffs of blue sword chi. Countless sword shadows suddenly spread in front of him. Puffs of blue sword chi linked together, instantly turning into a huge wave on the surface of the sea. His figure was completely covered by this blue wave. This was clearly the sword essence of Moon Sea Sword School. Facing such a stunning attack, Fong Wuk's unsharpened iron sword only stabbed forward in a straight line. But when the blunt sword tip reached its end, his body and wrists shook at the same time. In an instant, this sword dragged out more than a dozen sword energies in a small area. There was an explosion. Just now, The sword energy formed by his fierce and straight stab exploded in the air. Once it exploded, it was a straight and conical path. This straight line, coupled with the dozens of sword chis, looked like a spindle dragging dozens of messy threads in the air. Yet in this moment, these lines faded and disappeared. What replaced them was the gathering and explosion of primal energies of the universe. There was a muffled boom. 2 circular balls of light suddenly appeared on the stone platform. Countless energies shot out in all directions with these 2 balls of light as the center. The stone ground under the 2 balls of light seemed to be unable to withstand the impact of the energies and gave off dense and terrifying cracking sounds. Large amounts of dust and rubble sprayed out of the many cracks on the stone platform. Another wave of gasps sounded. These gasps were not due to fear of the stone platform collapsing. Even though this kind of stone platform was old and had many cracks, it was made of large rocks that weighed over 1,000 jin. Previously, there had been many cultivators with higher cultivation levels than the 2 of them fighting here, but this stone platform was still stable. The battle between the 2 of them naturally could not cause the stone platform to be completely destroyed. The gasps were endless because Fong Wuk's straight stab had clearly formed a sword seal. It looked like a straight thrust of the sword, but it brought about such a terrifying power. There were many arrogant young talents present. Some of them were at the bottom of the Book of Talents, and some of them were not on the Book of Talents. They were extremely unconvinced. But this stab was enough for them to understand the reason. Most people would not be able to withstand the first strike from the 2 of them. So strong. Amazing. Chun Yi's face paled slightly as he muttered 2 sentences to express his current emotions. At this time, the sword light had dissipated slightly. In the chaotic wind, Chen Lufeng and Fong Wuk were just 10 feet apart. The 2 had been evenly matched in the previous fight, and neither had been at a disadvantage. A shrill howl burst out from Chen Liufeng's mouth. One could see with the naked eye that an extremely pure Zhenyuan was gushing out from his palms. He stepped to the left, and the long sword in his right hand slashed wildly to the right. The sword chi that gushed out from the dark sword tore through the air, and countless dark blue water droplets suddenly condensed. In an instant, a real water wave actually appeared in the air. Chen Liufeng's black iron sword carried this blue wave that was several times larger than his body. With a howl, it slammed towards Fong Wuk. Ocean-crushing strike. Among the spectators on the riverbank, there were people who recognized this sword momentum and cried out in surprise. Chapter 130. This was the most powerful move of the Emerald Tide sword technique. Chen Liufeng's cultivation had already reached the 3rd realm upper class, and he was only a step away from breaking through to the 4th realm. The true essence cultivation method that he cultivated was definitely not ordinary. From afar, one could feel that his true essence was extremely pure. At this moment, he exerted all of his strength. His true essence frantically poured into the edgeless iron sword. This, seizing the sea strike, truly had the true meaning of several jade-green waves rising from the surface of the sea, completely fusing into the sword intent. Xie Chongqing's face paled as he watched. He felt that the thousands of gold had not been spent in vain. At this moment, he was standing right in front of Chen Lufeng. Even though there was a river between them, the wind coming from the sword caused his tied hair to scatter. Feeling the thick moisture in the air and the wave carried by the sword, he couldn't help but say in shock, "How can one block such a sword?" Ding Ning looked at the magnificence of this sword with some admiration in his eyes. Yet looking at Fong Wuk, who was standing like a boulder, he said softly, "Not necessarily." At this time, Fong Wuk attacked. The edgeless metal sword in his hand stabbed again. The sword move was extremely straight and did not look any different from the previous attack.
Boom.
His sword pierced a hole a few feet wide in the blue wave that was crashing towards him head-on. This sword had astounding penetrative power, but it was too straight and did not change. It could not hit Chen Lufeng, who was behind the wave. Xie Chongqing could not understand. He did not understand the meaning of this sword. Yet in this moment, Fong Wuk's vital energy surged out of his body and charged into the straight seal scripts on the blunt sword. The flat sword chi collided with the flat sword chi. It was as if an iron rod had been forcefully smashed apart and scattered. Countless lines suddenly appeared in front of Fong Wuk's sword. These countless lines pierced deeply into the blue waves, directly becoming cracks in the blue waves. In the next moment, the blue waves completely collapsed, turning into countless harmless splashes. Gasps and cries of surprise rang out. Shui Wangshu smiled and praised. Not bad. Zhang Yi said softly as though he was studying seriously. The true meaning of the stone cavern sword is to pierce gold and crack stone. It doesn't just have astounding penetrative power. Fong Wuk has truly grasped the true meaning of the stone cavern sword. No wonder he is on the Book of Talents. Dang! A loud sound rang out. Chen Liufeng's sword and Fong Wuk's sword clashed. Their bodies shook and they flew back. Amidst the clanging of metal and the gasps of countless people, Xie Chongqing's face paled. His eyes were wide as he said in disbelief, "He actually managed to stop this sword." The sea-grasping strike is the most powerful move of the Blue Sea Tide sword technique, and it consumes the most vital energy. Now that this sword has been defeated by Fong Wuk, how can Chen Lufeng win? Hearing his words, Ding Ning shook his head and murmured to himself, that may not be the case. Even though he had always called Ding Ning brother-in-law and admired Ding Ning's performance, Xie Chongqing couldn't help but feel angry that Ding Ning was opposing him. But at this time, Chen Lufeng, who had been sent flying back, gave another furious shout. All of the remaining vital energy in his body was channeled into the metal sword in his hand that was still humming violently. The metal sword in his hand slammed forward again. All of the gasps suddenly stopped. For the first time, Fong Wuk's calm and cold face showed shock. Blue sword energy once again sprayed out of the straight blade. Suddenly, countless blue water droplets appeared in the air. Then, they were slapped away by a resolute sword intent and were sent flying forward. The blue water droplets collided with the disorderly water flow in the air. Waves bloomed, forming countless white splashes that smashed towards Fong Wuk. Wan Taosheng, not bad. Shui Wangshu praised again. Fong Wuk's expression changed dramatically. He did not stab straight like before, but quickly stabbed 3 times in front of him. Suddenly, 3 sword holes appeared in the air in front of him. The energies in the 3 sword holes were pressing against each other, crushing the white waves into countless fine powder and dispersing them.
Boom.
At this time, Chen Liufeng's figure charged out of the mist and appeared in front of him. His body was completely soaked by the water. His shoulder even gave off soft sounds of bones cracking because he had hit a wave. But he did not stop. With a shout, his sword slapped multiple splashes and smashed towards Fong Wuk's waist. Fong Wuk's face immediately paled. His body flashed backwards, and his long sword slashed towards Chen Liufeng's attack. However, his sword was slower than his previous stab. With a clang, his sword stopped Chen Liufeng's sword, creating a ball of dazzling sparks. However, the white waves all smashed into his body. Before a groan of disbelief could come out of his mouth, his entire body had already flown backwards like a kite with a broken string. Behind him was the frozen river. A cracking sound was heard. His body smashed through the ice and fell into the icy river. The icy water splashed out of the cave. The 2 sides of the river were silent. On the stone platform, Chen Lufeng panted heavily. The long sword in his hand stabbed into the cracks of the stone platform like a walking stick. He seemed to have reached his limit, but at this time, he once again shouted, "Who is the winners?" The 2 sides of the river grew even more silent. Everyone knew that with Fong Wuk's cultivation, his life would not be in danger if he was slapped into the cold river water. But to be slapped off the high platform and unable to control his body and fall into the cold river water, he had already lost. If this was on the battlefield, being wounded by a sword and unable to control one's body was fated to be killed by a sword. Crash! Fong Wuk's figure jumped out of the water. His vital energy surged. Countless icy water droplets sprayed out and landed on the surrounding ice. His clothing was completely dry, but his lips were indescribably bruised. Without a word, he threw the unsharpened iron sword in his hand onto the ice next to him and then sprinted along the ice. This young talent was obviously so ashamed and resentful that he didn't even notice that one of his boots had fallen onto the ice. But there was no scorn from the crowd. Losing in public to someone who was ranked at the bottom would indeed make one feel extremely ashamed and indignant. However, strength was strength. The few strikes he had made earlier were enough to intimidate most of the young people present. What's going on? Xia Chongqing still found it hard to accept this result. He kept feeling that something was wrong. In his subconscious, Feng Wuke should have won, but the result was completely different. Victory does not just depend on the strength of vital energy and comprehension of the sword manual. Ding Ning glanced at him and said, "The fullness of sword essence is in the mind, energy, and spirit." From beginning to end, Chen Liufeng's sword essence was at its peak. The difference between the two was not great. In the last blow, Chen Liufeng's sword was full. Feng Wuke's presence was already weak, but he still wanted to leave a way out, afraid that something would happen after his vital energy was used up. If he was so hesitant in deciding victory, how could he win? Xia Chongqing's puzzlement disappeared. Thinking back to the scene just now, he felt that Ding Ning was right. Xue Wangxu looked at Ding Ning with a smile and said, "It seems that your understanding is deeper than many of the old swordsmen of Chongling." Ding Ning said calmly, "Recently, I have read your notes and learned a lot." Xue Wangxu thought and said, "If it is something good, friends should share it." Ding Ning said calmly, "As long as you agree." Hearing the two's conversation, Xia Chongqing, Nangong Kaishu, and Su Heshan started to realize Xue Wangxu's meaning. The three of them widened their eyes in joy. "Xue, you mean that we can also read your notes?" Nangong Kaishu couldn't help but ask softly. Xue Wangxu said with a smile, "It is just notes, not a treasure." "How is this not a treasure?" Xia Chongqing's voice trembled in excitement. "This is a treasure that cannot be bought with any amount of money. Senior sect brother." At this time, Ding Ning calmly bowed to Zhang Yi and said, "The matters of Chen Lufeng and Feng Wuke have been resolved, but the problems of the three people behind me have not been resolved. So please help me leave behind the two unsharpened iron swords." When Ding Ning said this, Zhang Yi was stunned. "Junior sect brother, you really?" Ding Ning nodded affirmatively and said, "If there is a problem, I naturally have to solve it. But you, this kind of unsharpened iron sword." Zhang Yi immediately became worried. He knew very well that Ding Ning had never touched this kind of sword before. If he was unfamiliar with the sword, his swordsmanship would be very different. "Do not be wishy-washy." Ding Ning looked at him and said, "I am telling you to leave behind the swords because you are my senior sect brother, and also because you are wishy-washy. Senior sect brother, you can become more decisive if you frequently speak in public. You are teaching your senior sect brother instead. This is slightly rude, but your words are reasonable." Xue Wangxu roared with laughter and pushed Zhang Yi. "Listen to your junior sect brother." Zhang Yi respected his teacher greatly. Hearing Xue Wangxu's words, he did not dare to disobey. While his expression was slightly troubled, he gritted his teeth and quickly cupped his fists towards the stone platform. He said loudly, "Brother Chen, please wait. Can you lend me the two unsharpened iron swords?" Because he saw Chen Lufeng was about to leave and someone had put away the two swords, he was slightly anxious. After speaking, he remembered that he had not introduced himself. So he added apologetically, "This one is Zhang Yi of White Goat Cave of Green Vine Sword Academy." On the stone platform, Chen Lufeng suddenly turned around. Gasps sounded from both sides. White Goat Cave had been famous in Chongling in the past few months. While Zhang Yi of White Goat Cave was not ranked in the top 100 of the talent ranking for some reason, in the minds of many people, Zhang Yi seemed to have enough strength to be ranked in the talent ranking. Now that he had publicly asked to borrow the swords, people naturally thought that there might be another fight today. Chapter 131. The surrounding gazes immediately gathered on the mound where Zhang Yi, Ding Ning, and the others were standing. You really want to fight? Chen Lufeng and Fang Wu's fight was like a great play that had just ended. Now, Ding Ning proposed to borrow a sword. For Xie Chongsheng, this meant that an even greater play was coming. He looked at Ding Ning, and his voice trembled in excitement. Lu Duofeng, Zhou Xie, and Xian Jianli, the three youths on the Book of Talents, had not recovered from the shock of the battle just now. When they heard Zhang Yi publicly ask to borrow a sword, their bodies shook at the same time. Of the three, Xian Jianli of Yellow Cloud Grotto Heaven was ranked 91st on the Book of Talents. He was ranked last, but in reality, he was the best at arguing of the three. At this time, he took a deep breath and calmed himself. He looked up slightly at Ding Ning and said slowly, "I am very happy that you dare to accept my challenge. It seems that you are not as weak as I imagined. Just now, Chen Lufeng has defeated Fang Wu. This is the best proof that the position on the Book of Talents is not so powerful that it cannot be changed." Xian Jianli's meaning was clear. Chen Lufeng could defeat Fang Wu, who was ranked higher than him. Then he naturally could defeat Ding Ning. Hearing his words, Ding Ning calmly shook his head and said, "I do not want to fight you. I will fight Zhou Xie."
What?
Xian Jianli, Lu Duofeng, and Zhou Xie stilled. On the stone platform on the opposite shore, Chen Lufeng finally vented his anger. While he was in a good mood, he was extremely tired. Zhang Yi's question could not bring him more joy. He bowed slightly in return and said, "If it is used immediately, I think no one will refuse to lend a sword." It is Lu Duofeng of Mountain Sword Tower, Zhou Xie, and Xian Jianli of Yellow Cloud Grotto Heaven. They are all on the Book of Talents.
Zhang Yi said.
That old man is Xue Wangxiu. The one with the broken sword on his waist is naturally Ding Ning. Is Ding Ning going to have a duel with one of these three? At this time, the people on the banks of the river also saw the clues, and a lot of voices sounded. While this would be a lower-ranked battle compared to Chen Lufeng and Fang Wu, there was Ding Ning. This wine-shop youth really doesn't know how to restrain himself. He's just watching a duel, and he's causing trouble out of nowhere. In a carriage parked on the riverbank, a young man in a gray robe laughed coldly. He was Ku Shichuan, the most incomprehensible person in this year's Book of Talents. Ding Ning had been the most eye-catching youth last winter. He had set a new cultivation record. People could understand why he was ranked 72nd, but most people could not understand why he was ranked 3rd. Compared to the Sword Trial Festival, Ku Shichuan was less handsome and more haggard. His face was too dry and pale, and his eyeshadow was too thick. But there was an unusual red in his eyes, and he appeared sickly after his energy was greatly damaged. But there was a sharpness in his movements that had not been there in the past. The more you show off before the Min Mountain Sword Trials, the faster you fall when it comes to the Min Mountain Sword Trials. Just like today, while Chen Lufeng won, his sword moves were seen so clearly by others. This is the work of a brute. A Shadow Mountain Sword Cave teacher sitting next to Ku Shichuan sneered. No matter how this wineshop youth performs today, he will not be a threat in the future. Ku Shichuan said with slight scorn, "I hope he can perform better." The Shadow Mountain Sword Cave teacher next to him raised his eyebrows in puzzlement. Ku Shichuan said, "I was able to comprehend on the sword wall because of him, Xie Chongsheng and the others. The better he performs, the more worried I am that he will catch up, and the harder I will cultivate." "Why did you choose me?" Zhou Xie waved his hand at Xian Jianli to stop him from speaking. Then he looked coldly at Ding Ning and asked, "I come from the marketplace and am more unscrupulous. In my view, things without benefits are boring." Ding Ning looked calmly back at this youth who looked clean and capable. He said, "My ranking is above yours. If I win against you, you think I deserve it. If I lose to you, I lose face and become your stepping stone. So, I do not have many benefits to fight with people like you, who are lower ranked." Zhou Xie's anger burned. He had no patience and sharply interrupted Ding Ning. "What do you mean? Is this still not clear?" Xia Chongxing mocked from aside. Even laborers do not work for nothing. Of course there needs to be some stakes in a duel like this. You really think you can win against me? Zhou Xie laughed in anger and looked straight at Ding Ning. What do you want to bet? Ding Ning said, if you lose, I want to see your Zhou family's painting remnant scroll. If you win, I will let you see Shue's notes. Zhang Yi was shocked. He instinctively wanted to say that this was not good. But Zhou Xie laughed angrily. You all know the painting remnant scroll of the Ink Garden's Zhou family. Just now, you say you have no impression of us. Ding Ning's expression did not change. He said calmly, you know the painting remnant scroll, but you may not know your position on the Book of Talents. The painting remnant scroll contained some wondrous sword forms, but there were only some ink drawings. There were no words or meridian diagrams. Different intents would produce different sword forms. I heard that the most talented person of the Ink Garden's Zhou family only managed to comprehend 3 of the moves. Your father named you Zhou Xie in hopes that you could comprehend 1 or 2 more moves. Regardless of whether we win or lose, we will limit it to 1 day. If I win, even if I read the painting remnant scroll for a day, I may not be able to comprehend anything. But if you read Shue's notes for a day, you will gain greatly. In this wager, I am going easy on you. Hearing Ding Ning's words, Shui Wangshu's murky eyes lit up. He said softly, you know a lot from the books you read. Zhou Xie was angry, but when he thought of the fact that Shui Wangshu had defeated General Liang Lian of the Tiger and Wolf Army and the notes left behind by such a grandmaster, his heart was moved. Since this is the case, I will accept your wager. Thank you for your good intentions. After saying this, he made a gesture of invitation to Ding Ning and walked down the river bank. It is Zhou Xie? Zhou Xie of Yellow Cloud Grotto Heaven is going to fight Ding Ning. With this gesture, everyone on both sides of the river understood. Ding Ning took off the last flower remnant sword at his waist and handed it to Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi couldn't help but want to say something. But when he saw Ding Ning raise his eyebrows slightly, he immediately closed his mouth. That's what I like about his unreasonable confidence. Xia Chongxing looked at Ding Ning's figure as he calmly walked down the frozen river. He said provocatively to Xin Yi, this is courage. So, do not have any improper thoughts about my sister. Xin Yi was slightly bashful but admitted he was not as good as Ding Ning. He probed, Zhou Xie's cultivation is Realm 3 first class, and supposedly, he cultivates the sitting and forgetting sutra of Yellow Cloud Grotto Heaven. His vital energy should have a great advantage compared to senior sect brother Ding Ning. How do you think senior sect brother Ding Ning will fight him? I don't know, Xia Chongxing said disdainfully. Xia Chongxing said disdainfully, I said it is unreasonable confidence. Zhou Xie's vital energy cultivation is stronger than his, and the Yellow Cloud Grotto Heaven's Yellow Cloud White Crane Sword Manual is very strong. When Ding Ning fought with you, the news that he was skilled in using the White Goat Sword Seal Manual has spread. Zhou Xie will naturally pay attention to his sword seal path. No matter how you look at it, Ding Ning has no reason to win. Xin Yi's face quickly paled. He also felt that Ding Ning had no reason to win. He had been cultivating with Ding Ning in this period of time. He knew that other than the improvement in his vital energy cultivation, Ding Ning had no other special encounters other than reading Shui Wangshu's notes. Even though Shui Wangshu's notes contained a lot of understanding of the sword manual, it was just theory. He hadn't cultivated it and comprehended it. It would only be useful in the future, not now. You are a pretty boy? Your face is so white. Xia Chongxing looked at his expression and said with even more disdain, so, what if it is unreasonable? He will still win. When Nangong Kaishu heard Xia Chongxing's words, she unconsciously nodded. She also felt that Ding Ning would win. She understood Ding Ning better than Xia Chongxing and the others. She faintly felt that behind this unreasonable confidence, Ding Ning was hiding something that could win. Just like when Ding Ning had defeated Su Qin at the Sword Trial Festival. But she did not know what Ding Ning was hiding this time. A yellow cloud rose from under Zhou Xie's feet. Zhou Xie, who had just reached the center of the river, rode this yellow cloud and flew up, landing on the stone platform. The yellow cloud continued to fly up. The pure energy did not dissipate for a long time, as though it was going to fly to the horizon. Zhou Xie stood with his hands behind his back, waiting for Ding Ning with unspeakable confidence. Cheers rang out from the crowd. On the other hand, Ding Ning casually walked across the frozen river towards the stone platform. While his cultivation is lower than Zhou Xie, if he uses some sword moves, it is easy for him to reach the stone platform. Now, he is putting on an act, and people find it laughable. Ku Shichuan sneered from the nearby carriage. But he suddenly thought of Xie Chongqing's words and closed his mouth, becoming silent. Ding Ning casually walked onto the stone platform. His movements did not pause as he casually gripped an edgeless black iron sword that was close to him. Zhou Xie looked at the edgeless black iron sword covered in icy water and said with slight disdain, "This is the sword that just now, Fang Wuk was defeated and fell into the icy water.
Do you not feel it is unlucky?"
Ding Ning looked at him and said calmly, "Those who use the sword must first respect the sword." His gaze landed on the edgeless black iron sword in his hand. He said, "There has never been a sword that is unlucky. The sword is life." His words seemed to give off an invisible power that caused Zhou Xie's brow to furrow. Chapter 132. Speaking of the principle that the sword is life, I have learned a lot after helping the Yuezhi garrison kill enemies in the past 2 years. Zhou Xie looked coldly at Ding Ning. He gripped the other edgeless black iron sword and said, "How can a common youth like you, who has not even left Chongling and seen the wind and sand of a true battle, be worthy of teaching me?" Ding Ning looked at this youth with a bun and a sword in his hand who gave off an iron-blooded presence. He said seriously, "I only hope that after this battle, you still have such drive. You have to understand, without defeat, there is no victory." Zhou Xie's brow suddenly furrowed. A layer of coldness flashed across his face. "You want to use words like this to disturb my mind? I fear that this is a method only gangsters use when they fight." He held his sword across his chest and expelled all the impatience in his body. Then he said coldly, "Start." As he held his sword across his chest, all the spectators on the two shores immediately focused. "Actually, this is not an absolutely fair fight." A voice sounded from a place on the slope. The speaker was a handsome youth dressed in a grand fox fur robe. Even he came. Many people recognized that this handsome youth was ranked 7th on the Book of Talents, the genius of Mind Chamber sect, Exian. Then, many people recalled that Exian's father was an important person in Hongyang Academy. But no one felt there was a problem with Exian being ranked 7th on the Book of Talents. Because in a trial of Mind Chamber sect last autumn, Exian had publicly displayed Realm 4 power. He was the student who had progressed the fastest in Mind Chamber sect. The Mind Chamber sect's Mind Sword was unique. Even if one was not Realm 5 and could not control flying swords, the unique Mind Sword could still allow the cultivators of Mind Chamber sect to use their mental power to form sword energy to stab or wound their opponents. The words of a person like this naturally had enough weight. You only pay attention to the ranking on the Book of Talents, but ignore that Ding Ning only started cultivating last year. While his ranking was high, the Book of Talents clearly recorded that he only had Realm 3 third-class cultivation, while Zhou Xie had Realm 3 first-class cultivation. Whether it is in terms of cultivation time or cultivation, this battle is not as fair as you think it is. Feeling the gazes of the surrounding people, Exian did not mind at all and continued, "So even if I lose, it doesn't mean anything." Many people could not help but frown, realizing that they had indeed overlooked this problem. Zhang Yi was completely convinced. He bowed to Exian from afar and said, "This person is a gentleman." Xie Chongqing pursed his lips. Although he had blind faith in Ding Ning and felt that Exian's actions were unnecessary, he also knew that Exian had good intentions. This way, even if Ding Ning lost, he would not be as embarrassed as Fang Wuk. But will Ding Ning lose? He snorted coldly. "Naturally, we don't think so." Nangong Kaishu said softly, but most people here think the opposite. Xie Changsheng stilled slightly. When he looked at the expressions of the people around him, he immediately became angry. If he had the time, he might do something else. But Ding Ning did not give him enough time. At this time, Ding Ning on the stone platform had calmly held a sword across his chest and said, "Please." The cool voice cut through the air in front of him and passed clearly into the ears of everyone watching. In the next moment, it turned into a sharp sword hum. Ding Ning's figure did not move, but the long sword in his hand drew out more than a dozen sword marks in the air in front of him. White sword chi flowed out of the black sword, crisscrossing and instantly forming a white sword talisman in front of him. White goat sword seal manual.
So fast.
All the noise immediately disappeared into gasps. Chun Yi's breath caught in his throat as his eyes widened to the extreme. He recognized that this was the sword move of the white goat sword seal manual. But unlike the sword seal that had been used against him, this sword seal had turned into a large river instead of green mountains on both sides. How can he be so fast? Zhang Yi's face was filled with shock. A moment ago, he had been deeply worried that Ding Ning would not be used to this kind of unsharpened metal sword. But now, it seemed that Ding Ning had an easier time using the sword, and this blow was even faster. Zhou Xie had never thought that Ding Ning would be so decisive, and Ding Ning's sword seal would be so powerful. In his eyes, Ding Ning's figure could no longer be seen. He could only see a large river pouring over. Ding Ning was really strong. With this sword move, he was worthy of being ranked in the Book of Talents. His heart was filled with shock. As this thought flashed through his mind, a sharp whistle burst out from his mouth. His sword had originally been held horizontally in front of his chest. This was the etiquette of the Qin dynasty when fighting. But at this time, he pushed this sword horizontally in front of him. His right arm started to tremble, followed by his fingers. Boundless and pure true essence poured into the black sword at an astonishing speed, and then it turned into a dazzling yellow light. A large yellow dam seemed to appear in front of him, blocking this large river without any finesse. His vital energy cultivation was 2 minor realms higher than Ding Ning, so he did not need any finesse, and only needed to use the most reliable method to fight. Seeing him use this sword move, Luo Duofeng and Xian Jianli, who were watching from nearby Xie Changsheng and the others, had joy on their faces. In their view, if Zhou Xie was right, this battle was mostly won. There was a muffled boom. The large river collapsed, but the yellow dam did not disappear and continued to press forward. With this sword move, Zhou Xie showed power that surpassed Ding Ning. While the stone platform was wide, the power of Zhou Xie's sword almost covered half of the stone platform. The seemingly slow and mountainous presence was already in front of Ding Ning. Ding Ning's expression was normal. He pushed his sword forward, and a patch of wildfire seemed to burn in front of him. This patch of wildfire appeared thin, but it managed to offset the remaining power of Zhou Xie's sword. There was a soft sound. Zhou Xie stilled slightly. The blunt sword tip in Ding Ning's hand pierced through the overflowing energy and hit the sword he had pushed forward. With the help of this push and push of the sword, Ding Ning's body flew backwards nimbly. Zhou Xie's eyes narrowed slightly. He took a deep breath, his chest expanding. His vital energy used the pressure of this breath to quickly flood into his long sword and launch a counterattack. Yet at this time, his breathing paused slightly. Ding Ning, who was flying in the air, attacked again. His sword move had an inexplicable beauty and rhythm. A white sword seal formed at this time. The white sword seal disappeared and turned into countless burning lights. It was clearly morning, but a setting sun appeared in the air in front of him. Almost instinctively, Zhou Xie swung his sword upwards. The vital energy that surged into his straight sword turned into a yellow cloud that flew upwards. The sword essence was elegant, as though it was going to fly to the horizon. There was an explosion. The setting sun formed from seal essence could not withstand the power of this sword and exploded. The broken red flames and the yellow clouds mixed together, instantly forming a brilliant ray of light that was dozens of feet long above the stone platform. The brilliant ray of light illuminated the two shores and the dim ice in the middle. More colors spilled out. This was a beautiful scene. Yet almost all the cultivators' gazes did not linger on the ray of light, but landed in front of Zhou Xie. There, Ding Ning had landed. Ding Ning's body was only a few steps away from the edge of the stone platform, but his expression was still calm. At this time, he had already attacked. Zhou Xie felt extremely satisfied. Just now, his sword move was called Yellow Cloud/Red Cloud. Ding Ning's sword seal seemed to have come together to complement his sword move. In the past few years, he had never been able to execute a sword strike so thoroughly, so comfortably, and so worthy of recollection. But at this time, he suddenly felt something was wrong. His sword momentum was already exhausted, but it was still rising high up in the air. But Ding Ning's sword had already struck. A simple sword seal had formed in front of Ding Ning. His pupils contracted violently. He reacted. Just now, Ding Ning had purposefully used such a sword move to induce him to perform the Yellow Cloud/Red Cloud. An incomparably violent howl burst out of his mouth. The long sword in his hand slashed down with a speed that exceeded his usual limit. Still too slow. Someone sighed on the riverbank. If he uses too much power now, he will not succeed. Xian also shook his head. He looked at Ding Ning with admiration in his eyes. Moss. Zhang Yi was so happy, he could not finish a sentence. In the carriage, Ku Shichuan's expression suddenly became ugly. Many people did not have the same emotions as them, but in their eyes, victory was already decided. Crack! Zhou Xie's sword slashed at an ice tree that was charging at him. Countless pieces of ice flew out. He let out a furious roar as numerous ice shards smashed into his chest. He couldn't control his body at all as he retreated continuously. It was only at this moment that the rest of the spectators reacted and exclaimed in unison. Ding Ning had already attacked again. Another great river poured down towards Zhou Xie with a momentum of thousands of miles. So fast. How can he be so fast? However, Zhang Yi was able to make a complete comment on the swordsmanship. This was the fastest sword move in the White Goat Sword Seal Manual. Ding Ning's pursuit of victory was appropriate. But this sword move was one of the 3 most complicated sword seals in the White Goat Sword Seal Manual. Zhang Yi found it hard to believe that Ding Ning had used his sword like this. Hearing Zhang Yi's exclamation, Xue Wangxiu smiled slightly and knocked his head with his knuckles. You idiot, you are fast with a remnant sword. Can you not be faster with a good sword? As if he was suddenly enlightened, Zhang Yi suddenly came to a realization. The seal scripts of the last flower remnant sword were incomplete, and the direction of the sword energy was even harder to grasp. Even though this edgeless sword was unfamiliar to Ding Ning, it was at least complete. Junior sect brother Ding Ning is a genius among geniuses to be so fast with that remnant sword. At this thought, he sank into even greater shock. Unable to control his figure, his body had suffered a heavy blow. Even if he had hurriedly attacked, his sword moves would have been disrupted. Ding Ning's attack was purely for speed. Even Lu Duofeng's face was drained of blood. He felt that Zhou Xie would undoubtedly lose.
How can I lose to you?
Yet at this time, Zhou Xie shouted angrily. His left hand's fingers touched the black sword. Like playing a musical instrument, 5 waves of vital energy furiously charged into the seal scripts from the center of the sword. A patch of ink light appeared in front of him. It was like an ink painting of mountains and rivers. Nangong Saishi's expression suddenly turned grave. She said gravely, "Painting sword move. Mountains and rivers like painting." The first move of the painting remnant scroll. Among the spectators, there were some who were more perceptive and immediately cried out the name of this sword style. When the surging river crashed into the ink light, it seemed to be fixed in the painting and could not advance at all. Using this chance, Zhou Xie's feet stomped hard. Dust sprayed out from the cracks in the stone under his body. Once again, He let out a fierce roar. His body rushed forward, holding the sword with both hands, and slashed forward. Yellow clouds spread on the sword, and then white light shone. This was the yellow cloud white crane sword essence. While this attack was hurried and not at full power, it cut straight to the center with great presence. It was more powerful than any of the previous attacks Ding Ning had used. The two sides of the river were completely silent. Ding Ning was just a few steps away from the edge of the river. What could he do when absolute power came at him without any finesse? Chapter 133. Ding Ning's expression was still absolutely calm facing this blow that came with pure power. Under everyone's shocked gazes, the sword in his hand pierced forward and then flicked upwards. The white sword chi that gushed out from the tip of the sword curved upwards in the cold air with this movement. White goat hanging horns. Many people, including Zhang Yi, stilled. No one had thought that Ding Ning would use the most ordinary move of the white goat sword manual against such a blow. Yet when he saw this move and sensed the sword essence of Ding Ning's blow, Shui Wangshu first smiled in satisfaction and then felt stunned. He found that even if he used Ding Ning's vital energy to cast this move, he could not do it more perfectly. The essence of this blow was perfect. The sword energy that curved like the white goat's horn creaked forward and finally collided with the long sword shrouded in yellow clouds and white light. To many people's shock, victory was not immediately decided. The thickest part of the white goat's horn stopped the power of Zhou Shi's blow. The soles of Ding Ning's boots made an unpleasant sound of friction against the stone surface and finally exploded. Ding Ning took 2 steps back and was only 1 step away from the edge of the stone platform behind him. Yet he stood still in the end. Ares hanging horns was the most ordinary move in the Ares sword manual, but it was also the most extraordinary move. The most important part of white goat hanging horn was not the flick of the horn, but forbearance and balance. Lowering one's head to avoid the edge, forbearance, and counterattack when the other's momentum was exhausted. Cries of surprise rang out like a tide. Zhou Xie was also in great shock. His sword move was exhausted, and he had used all the vital energy he could explode in an instant. Yet Ding Ning was still standing firmly on the stone platform. Ding Ning raised his head at this time. The long sword in his hand sank slightly, and he used all the remaining power in the sword. The white goat's horn that had appeared thin in the air also sank slightly. Just like a white sheep that was even more humble, it lowered its head even more. However, some people retracted their fists so that they could punch harder. Some people bent down and lowered their heads so that they could raise their fists more forcefully. As Ding Ning's sword sank, it slashed out. The white goat horn that was so thin it was about to disappear rose up powerfully and hit Zhou Shi's chest.
Bang!
A loud sound rang out, as if he had been defeated. Zhou Shi's body flew backwards like a bundle of dry wood picked up by a farmer and fell heavily into the river. Only now did the power in Ding Ning's body loosen slightly. A wave of qi spread outwards with his feet as the center. The people standing on both sides of the riverbank were shocked speechless. Many people could not control their emotions and cried out in surprise. In the carriage, Ku Shichuan's expression was extremely dark. She was silent and thinking of something. While everyone saw that Ding Ning had not won easily, he had won. Also, Zhou Xie had comprehended a move from the painting remnant scroll. Looking at the wonders of that move, if the Hongyang Academy knew, Zhou Xie's position on the Book of Talents would be much higher. These were the thoughts of most people present. For some people with higher standards, Ding Ning had shown many more things in this battle. From beginning to end, Ding Ning had been in charge of this battle. Starting from the first sword move, Ding Ning had guided Zhou Xie's sword moves. Theoretically, Zhou Xie should have more battle experience than Ding Ning. This should not have happened. But that was exactly what happened. Also, this wine shop youth's body did not seem as weak as the rumors said. His vital energy is not enough compared to others, but his understanding and use of sword essence after this battle. What rank will he be on the Book of Talents? Someone said in shock. Hearing this, the Exion of Mind Chamber sect smiled and said, "Then it will be a matter of the Hongyang Academy." The two sides of the river bank became silent again. This was something they did not need to think about here. The Hongyang Academy would make more accurate considerations than them. Cave Master, looking at Ding Ning, who was standing on the stone platform, looking at Ding Ning's slightly golden face under the morning light, Zhang Yi felt that he was also glorious. He looked joyfully at Shui Wangshu, his eyes full of desire for knowledge. Shui Wangshu knew of his puzzlement and said softly with a smile, "He chose 2 sword manuals from me. One is the White Goat Sword Seal Manual, and the other is the White Goat Sword Manual. The White Goat Sword Manual is the most ordinary sword manual of White Goat Cave. Any disciple can choose to cultivate it. But since White Goat Cave was founded, it has been engraved in the secret cave for a long time. This seemingly simple sword manual naturally has its reason for existence." Hearing this, the puzzlement in Zhang Yi's eyes disappeared and turned into true admiration. Thinking of Ding Ning's white goat hanging horn, he sighed from the bottom of his heart. Junior sect brother Ding Ning is really extraordinary. I am not as good as junior sect brother Ding Ning. Shui Wangshu laughed. He chose 2 sword manuals. One of them is the White Goat Sword Manual. I fear that when he saw the contents of this sword manual, he sensed the true meaning within. With such talent, how can you not be as good as junior sect brother Ding Ning? Who in Chongling can compare to him in understanding sword manuals? Why do you belittle yourself? He often says that you are soft-hearted and wishy-washy. In reality, even your sword essence has a hint of hesitation. You need to have benevolence, but it depends on who you're facing. If you add more when you should not, that is adding feet to a snake. When using the sword, the slightest mistake could lead to a huge loss. If you were to fight with someone who is weaker than you could naturally win easily. However, if you were to encounter someone who is at the same level as you, or even slightly stronger than you, how could you win if you were to hesitate? If you can really change with your talent, you can at least have a place in the Book of Talents. Hearing Shui Wangshu's long-winded words, Zhang Yi had some thoughts. He lowered his head in shame and said, "Am I not good at both being a person and using the sword?" Shui Wangshu looked at him and said seriously, "Both have problems, but it is hard to change a person's nature. I only hope that before I close my eyes, I can see you remove the hint of hesitation in your sword essence." Hearing these words, Zhang Yi was shocked. He said in a trembling voice, "This disciple will do his best." Shui Wangshu turned his head and thought, in the end, he is still lenient to use such a method to force you. Zhou Xie stood up from the ice. Ding Ning's blow was not strong enough. He was only thrown off the stone platform and rolled down the slope. He was not like Fong Wuk, who smashed a large hole in the frozen river. Yet his expression was the same as Fong Wuk's. His originally blood-red lips were now extremely bruised. How is it? Xie Chongsheng would not pass on a chance to mock his opponent. He turned around and looked at Luo Duofeng and Xian Jianli, especially Xian Jianli. He said, "Just now, you say you can defeat him. If you go up now, what will happen?" Xian Jianli's face was snow-white. He, who was eloquent, could not speak. But Xie Chongsheng was not satisfied. He looked at Xian Jianli and said in an even more disdainful tone, "Also, your vital energy cultivation is 2 minor realms higher than Ding Ning. 2 minor realms higher. This is not a fair fight, but you cannot win. Don't you feel embarrassed?" Xian Jianli was extremely ashamed and angry, but he knew that what Xie Chongsheng said was a fact that no one could change. Therefore, he could only lower his head, his hands trembling uncontrollably as he endured such humiliation. Zhou Xie, who was the focus of everyone's gazes, felt even more humiliated. He bit his lips so hard they bled. Yet he did not leave immediately like Fong Wuk. He waited for Ding Ning to walk in front of him. "When do you want to enter my garden to see the painting remnant scroll?" He did not look at Ding Ning's face and said with a bowed head. Ding Ning said calmly, "As soon as possible." Zhou Xie was silent for a long moment and said, "Then today." Ding Ning said, "All right." Ding Ning's voice was calm, but Zhou Xie inexplicably felt tears. He asked in a trembling voice, "Does your sword use come more from your comprehension or Shui Wangxi's notes?" Ding Ning glanced at him and said, "Many people understand but cannot use it." He did not answer directly, but Zhou Xie understood. Being able to understand and being able to use it were two different things. So Ding Ning naturally relied more on his own comprehension. "What do you think?" In one of the carriages on the two sides of the river, Li Lingjuan's most important strategist, Lu Sish, put down the curtain and asked a white-robed youth next to him. This white-robed youth was tall and had an ordinary face. However, he had a calm aura that was neither warm nor fiery. He was Yi Haoran, ranked second on the Book of Talents. Hearing Lu Sish's question, he said seriously, "If he can reach Realm 3 First Class before the Min Mountain Sword Trials, I may not have the confidence to win. But if he can only reach Realm 3 Second Class, I should have the confidence to win." Lu Sish said calmly, "It has nothing to do with what sword manual he grasps." Yi Haoran nodded. "The vital energy difference is too great. It is the difference between a pond and a basin of water. If I can spend as I wish, I can take the lead." Lu Sish smiled slightly and said, "There is not enough time. No matter how fast his breakthrough, he can only reach Realm 3 Second Class at the Min Mountain Sword Trials." Yi Haoran nodded. While Ding Ning's performance today had stunned him, overall, he was not surprised by the strength of these people. Ding Ning walked across the frozen river toward Shui Wangxiu, Xia Changsheng, and the others. Many gazes landed on him, filled with admiration, jealousy, and awe. But he did not have a proud expression and was still very calm. "I will immediately go to Ink Garden to see the painting remnant scroll," he said softly, bowing slightly to Shui Wangxiu. Xia Changsheng suddenly grew excited and asked Zhou Xie, who was walking up the slope to return to his carriage, "Can we go see?" Zhou Xie's expression froze slightly and his mouth twitched. Was the painting remnant scroll something just anyone could read? What's more, Xia Changsheng's sarcastic remarks were truly abominable to the extreme. "I know you are not willing, but I heard that Ink Garden is relatively old. If I pay to repair it, how about it?" Xia Changsheng's voice reached his ears. Chapter 134. Do you think everyone will bend over for money? Zhou Xie could no longer control his emotions. He suddenly turned around and said in a furious voice, "Shut up, do you not find it embarrassing enough?" However, at this moment, a calm but dangerous voice sounded not far away. "Sometimes, it's okay to bend for money." Zhou Xie's face paled again. He was shocked and unable to understand. But he almost instinctively bowed towards the source of the voice and said in a trembling voice, "Father." A middle-aged man with a jade-like complexion, dressed in indigo robes, and looking like the wanderer of tranquility slowly walked out from behind a carriage. The Zhou family was an old prestigious family of the Qin dynasty. While they had started to decline after the Shang reform and after the Yuanwu emperor ascended the throne, the Zhou family, like almost all the old prestigious families, did not have a foothold. But the old nobility naturally had extraordinary resources. At this time, Zhou Xie's father, Zhou Yunhai, walked out. While he did not hold a position in the court, he walked slowly with the gait of a dragon and a presence that the new nobility of Chongling did not have. Compared to his presence, Xia Changsheng gave people the feeling of a rustic nouveau riche. But Xia Changsheng seemed to want to express this nouveau riche presence to the extreme. Hearing this person's voice and seeing Zhou Xie's respectful and ashamed appearance, Xia Changsheng's eyes suddenly lit up. He looked at Zhou Yunhai, who was walking over, and asked, "Is there room to talk?" Zhou Yunhai first bowed slightly to Shui Wangxiu before smiling slightly. He said, "Since my son has lost the bet and is letting outsiders enter to study the painting remnant scroll, I do not mind adding a few more outsiders. If these young talents can comprehend some exquisite sword forms from the Zhou family's painting remnant scroll and achieve great feats in the future, it will be passed down as a legend." Zhou Yunhai's presence was still graceful and elegant, but Xie Chongqing's eyes shone even brighter. He said crisply, "How much gold?" Zhou Yunhai seemed to find Xie Chongqing interesting and said with a smile, 10,000 gold per person? Xie Chongqing said directly, "Deal." Zhang Yi was also from a poor family. When he heard that entering the garden to view the scriptures would cost 10,000 taels of gold, even though Xie Chongqing did not care and was obviously going to help them pay, he still felt uneasy and could not help but open his mouth to say something. At this moment, Shui Wangshu glanced at him. He immediately came to a realization and kept his mouth shut. Shui Wangshu said coolly, "No need to count me in. I heard that ink garden scenery is good. I will look at the scenery later." Zhou Yunhai said respectfully, "Shui is a grandmaster of his generation. Naturally, he doesn't need to look at the Zhou family's remnant book." Shui Wangshu shook his head and said, "You do not have to be so humble. Even the Chongling geniuses who were much stronger than me in the past placed great importance on the painting remnant scroll. I did not look because I did not want to see the sword essence that made my heart itch, but I did not have enough time to cultivate it." Zhou Yunhai was slightly startled. He sighed and said nothing more. Zhang Yi heard this and felt even more urgent. He felt even more ashamed that just now he had been so wishy-washy. Zhou Xie followed behind Zhou Yunhai onto the Zhou family carriage and led the way. In this period of time, Zhou Xie kept his head bowed and did not speak. When the carriage started to move, he finally looked up. But no one knew a son better than a father. Just by looking at the light in his eyes, Zhou Yunhai knew what he was thinking. "Do not ask me when I came." Zhou Yunhai looked at him and said calmly, "Regardless of the Lingshu Sword Gate's Mausoleum of Swords meeting or the Min Mountain Sword Sex trials, they appear to be competitions between the young geniuses of the Qin dynasty, but behind the scenes, are they not competitions between all the prestigious families and nobility of the Qin dynasty? How high the geniuses of the family can stand in Chongling in the future usually means how high the family can stand in Chongling in the future. Today, Chun Lufeng and Fong Wux's duel is equivalent to the first battle of the Min Mountain Sword trials. How can I not come? When you Luo Duofeng and Xian Jianli were fighting for positions with them, I arrived. But I had not expected that Ding Ning would choose you of the three. So, I am naturally responsible for your defeat today." His tone was not reproachful, but Zhou Xie felt even more ashamed and self-reproachful. He gritted his teeth and said, "I had not expected him to be so strong." Regardless of whether you expected him to be so strong or not, if you were just a bit stronger, he would have undoubtedly lost. Zhou Yunhai looked coolly at him and said, "So I only hope that you will turn the shame of this defeat into motivation for your cultivation. Even if you are defeated today, if you defeat him in the Min Mountain Sword trials in the future, who will care about today's defeat?" After a slight pause, Zhou Yunhai looked at Zhou Xie and said, "After we return, go into seclusion. Think, even if you are humiliated, there is only half a year until the Min Mountain Sword trials. So what if you endure for half a year? I hope that you will learn from that wine shop youth's indifference to honor and disgrace." Zhou Xie's emotions slowly calmed. He looked gratefully at his father, but was still puzzled. He said, "Father, does the family really care about money? Why let them enter the garden to view the sword manuals for this money?" Zhou Yunhai said coldly, "You are still not clear-headed. How much time did the Zhou family spend studying the painting remnant scroll for generations? In one day, what can these young people see? Other people do not know, but do you not know how much money old forefather needs to cultivate?" Hearing the words old forefather, Zhou Xie immediately felt cold and realized. When they had come, Nangong Kaishu, Su Heshan, and Xie Chongsheng had been in the same carriage. But now, Xie Chongsheng was in the same carriage as Ding Ning and Shun Yi as they headed towards the old garden of the declining Zhou family. Oh no! Just as they left the riverbank and entered the main path, Xie Chongsheng slapped his head and shouted in frustration. "What is it?" Shun Yi was shocked. Xie Chongsheng sighed and said, "Just now, I forgot about Xian of Mind Chamber sect. Otherwise, I could have invited him to come with us." Ding Ning glanced at him and said, You really have too much money to spend. You are frustrated that you cannot spend it? Money is born to be spent, Xie Chongsheng said matter-of-factly. Xie Chongsheng said matter-of-factly, my father said that it's fine to spend money, like water. The most important thing is that new money comes in like water. Water goes out and water comes in. This way, one can continuously receive good intentions and friendship. Otherwise, if the dead things are piled up there, they will be taken away by others in the end. Ding Ning frowned slightly. After a long moment of silence, he said, there is a reason why the Guanzhong Xie family can become wealthy. Xie Chongsheng was slightly smug but also curious. You can go and see the painting remnant scroll as you wish. I am better at spending money than you, but I have not read as many books as you. What is the painting remnant scroll? Looking at Xie Chongsheng, who had spent tens of thousands of gold but did not even know what the painting remnant scroll was, Ding Ning could only shake his head and say inside, fortune favors fools. Very simple. After shaking his head, he said calmly, the painting remnant scroll is something similar to the sword wall of the Shadow Mountain Sword Cave. In the primordial era, the earliest people started to search for ways to strengthen their bodies in order to fight against natural disasters, beasts, and diseases. Some people stood out and comprehended ways to increase their strength. In the era before writing, those earliest cultivators used all kinds of methods to pass down their cultivation methods. Xie Chongsheng was stunned and couldn't help but interrupt. You say it is very simple. Why is it so complicated? Ding Ning ignored him and continued. So, what records cultivation methods may not be words. The simplest may be some knots, some simple symbols, and pictures. Thousands of years later, some cultivation methods that were not very powerful and meaningless would naturally be eliminated. However, some of them were still very powerful after countless generations of evolution in the world of cultivators or cultivation methods that surpassed the secret manuals of most sects, so they would naturally be preserved. However, the method of recording is different from now. Present cultivators have to comprehend the true meaning inside. Xie Chongsheng and Shun Yi finally understood. They said in unison, you mean that the painting remnant scroll is like the sword wall of the Shadow Mountain Sword Cave. It is equivalent to a book left behind by an ancient sect, but it is not recorded in ordinary words? Ding Ning nodded and said, the painting remnant scroll looks like an ink painting of mountains and rivers, and it is a painting technique. It has the presence of mountains and rivers, but may not have the shape of mountains and rivers. Even more importantly, this ink painting of mountains and rivers is incomplete. Thus, it is even harder to comprehend the true meaning of the Grandmaster who left behind this painting. After a pause, Ding Ning looked seriously at Shun Yi and Xie Chongsheng. He said slowly, but what is certain is that this remnant scroll contains many sword forms and cultivation principles. It is like the general outline of a sect ceremony. Just now, Zhou Xie's picturesque mountains and rivers move is the weakest and most superficial. It cannot even leave the painting. Xie Chongsheng's expression immediately grew serious. He said, if Zhou Xie's attack was at full power, I fear that not many people in the Book of Talents would be able to withstand it. Even that attack was the most superficial and the weakest, and could not touch the true meaning of this remnant scroll. Then, just to take a look, the tens of thousands of gold were not wasted. Ding Ning said calmly, of course it was not wasted. Before the Yuanwu Emperor ascended the throne, the Zhou family did not allow even the most powerful people in court to see the remnant scroll. At this time, in the court, I fear that only the Holy One and the Empress have seen the remnant scroll. As to now, if we are Realm 6, I fear that no matter how much money we spend, the Zhou family will not open Ink Garden to let us enter to see the remnant scroll. Zhou Yanhai agreed, because he was certain that we would not be able to see anything in such a short time. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.